Good morning. Good morning. Very warm welcome. Happy New Year, even though we're a month out. Christmas will be here soon. It's great to be back with our first council meeting for the year. And to open our meeting this morning, welcome Kevin Wall from Salvation Army. Come and join us at the table and invite you to open our meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Let me pray with you. Father God, we thank you for this day, for the goodness around us and all that you provide for us. Lord, we live in a country where we are able to vote and to put the people, bring the people we want to stand on our councils. And so I thank you for that ability and that freedom. Many matters of importance will be presented and discussed and debated and decided on throughout the year. And as this is the opening meeting, I pray for your guidance, wisdom and clarity as the team work for the betterment of the district and its people. May there be a sense of peace in every council meeting, even when disagreement happens from time to time. May you bless the mayor and the councillors and all present in this room. And I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Kevin. Anything that you wish to share with us about what's happening, what's coming up?
The Feilding Christian Leaders Network have been working towards the 150-year celebrations, and our part in the combined church service on the Sunday and an event on the Sunday night as well. So, yeah, a month to get it all in all together. Like many people, we've had lots away, so we're just coming together this month to finalise things, but it seems to be progressing all right. So that's our main objective at the moment.
Excellent. Look forward to it. And thank you to you and the rest of the team for coming on board. So thank you for joining us this morning and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Right, so straight into our agenda, we have no apologies. We do have a request for leave of absence for Councillor Hadfield for the 18th to the 22nd of March. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford and Councillor McFadden. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Item 4 is confirmation of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, the 7th of December and the 14th of December. Those have been circulated. It's a long time in our memories to remember back to then. So I'll take them individually. The first recommendation, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 7th of December 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Underwood, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And recommendation 2.
I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 14th of December 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Blackmore. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5, declaration of interest. Any topics on our agenda today that elected members may wish to declare? None today? Great, thank you. Right, so we're able to move through the agenda quite fast. No public forum, presentations, late items or recommendations from committees. So we can go straight to page 21, and these are the minutes for our information from the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 14th of December. I'll ask Councillor Campbell, is there anything in there that you particularly wanted to highlight?
Thank you, Worship. No, there's not.
Great. Any questions, comments? Great, let's move on. They were for our information. So item 11.2, we're on page 31. This is the Awahuri Kitchener Park recruitment, trustee recruitment and reverse CCO exemption. My apologies. trying to rattle through the agenda. 11.1, yes, thank you. Go back to the beginning of the officers' report. New Zealand Community Trust funding application. So as you've seen in the information, the part of the criteria for funding applications is there needs to be a resolution from council for this application to go forward. So welcome, Janine and Lynn, hand it over to you.
Good morning, Your Worship and council members. It's actually quite a privilege to be the first officers report to present for the year, but this is a different report to other reports. We're actually asking permission to ask others for money rather than asking council for money. So as Her Worship alluded to, this is part of the redevelopment of the community hub, but it's the landscaping and the recreational area. And although we've got a budget set aside to do the landscaping part, it's not enough to actually do the recreational portion. And so the team thought that the best way to utilise that space was to put a basketball hoop, backboard and half court. So it sort of would link into not only the Makino precinct, where it's a recreational area with our skate park and of course the Makino Aquatic Centre. It actually lends itself to what we're hoping to deliver in the community hub with our space for youth. Unless there's any questions, happy to ask.
Excellent. Councillor Quarry.
Why don't you do this more often? Ask other people.
Well, it's actually something that's on our radar, Councillor Quarry, to be doing more of that. And I guess, although it's not mentioned in the report, we've just signed up for what's called Grants Guru, and that will go live out to our community, be launched in mid-February. And that's an opportunity for not only us to apply for third-party funding, but also for our community and our businesses. So watch the space.
Excellent. Councillor Underwood.
On 3.5, it says that the quote was the preferred quote. I was just wondering if it was the cheapest or it was preferred because Green by Nature were doing the other landscaping.
Excuse me, through you, Your Worship, it was the cheapest quote. And what I probably should put in there, it ranged from $120,000, which gave you the Rolls Royce, to what you would call a Skoda, but it enabled us to do what we would like to do, and that was just to have a blackboard, a court that was going to be something that would blend in with the current.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I note on 7.1, 79K had already been budgeted in the long-term plan for landscaping. I take it this is another 23.5 grand on top of that. Seems to me that over 100 grand for a bit of landscaping is actually quite a bit of gardening. Just more of an observation than a question, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you had any plans or designs that we could visualise this area. Not to make a decision. It's just quite helpful to see, but guessing no.
Yes. We do.
Okay.
We have planned.
Yep.
For the landscape.
But not to present today.
No.
As part of this.
No.
Yeah, that's a good point. It would be good to have a look and just add a visual at some stage to see what that would look like. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move that Council approves the funding application to New Zealand Community Trust for the amount of $23,500, excluding GST, towards the installation of a basketball hoop, backboard and concrete half court as part of the landscaping and recreational development at the site of the newly redeveloped community hub library.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell.
I second it, but Councillor Ford, you missed out the $500.
Oh.
23,500.
23,500. Thank you for pointing out my error.
Thank you. And Councillor Bell, you're happy to second that? Thank you. No further questions, comments? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to that, receiving that one. Now we go to page 31, 11.2, Awahuri Forest and Kitchener Park Trustee Recruitment and Reverse CC Exemption. So as the document says there, the Kitchener Park currently has an exemption from the CCO requirements, and this is looking to reverse that. And I'll hand it over to Marie and Lynn to explain it a bit more.
Good morning, Mayor Helen and councillors. So as Mayor Helen's alluded to, this paper is to formalise the discussion that was had at workshop at the end of last year. So the paper is twofold, seeking approval to progress recruitment of 3 trustees and to introduce a statement of expectation and statement of intent process, which the intent of that is to provide some structure and to ensure that we're heading in the same direction with the trust, with council's strategic direction. To introduce the statement of expectation, statement of intent process, we're seeking approval to revoke the CCO exempt status of the trust. And then just for further information, a further action discussed at the workshop was for Manawatū District Council to assist the trust in developing a health, safety and wellbeing policy. And Amy Flanders, our safety and wellbeing advisor, is attending their workshop next week to help them develop this. So those were the key things from the workshop, and just looking to cement those. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. And also we're looking to advertise and fill the 3 vacancies on the trust?
Yes, that's right. So seeking approval to progress the recruitment progress.
So have the Kitchener Park Trust, are they aware of the process we're discussing today? Yes. And they're comfortable with that?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. So with that, let's open it up for discussion. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I've actually given this a bit of thought, and I can sort of understand why why a statement of intent or a general steer is required. I'm not totally convinced that we need to go down the exemption line. However, I'm happy to support this if we actually move to a position where council actually recognises the work that our trustees do, as in other CCOs that receive directors' fees. Is that we at least show some appreciation of the work that these people do by introducing an honorarium at whatever level is deemed appropriate. So on the basis of that, I think that's actually fair and equitable. I'll support the motion if we can move to a position of that. Otherwise, I will not.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Yes, I actually support Councillor Hadfield's comments, and you probably recall I've mentioned that many times for many years. Is it up to the council to decide whether they were in the position to receive an honorarium, or is the trust in the position with their operating budget to make that decision themselves?
My understanding, based on the trustee, is that that would need to be a council decision. Is that correct, Shane, from your thinking?
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that we would have to revise the trustee, bring that back to council and go through that process. And then we'd have to decide whether it comes out of their existing budgets or whether we were to allow for additional funding.
Because I suspect we should be looking at the Civic Centre Trust at the same time. So not today, at a later date.
Well, we can't do it on the hoof. We have to get advice around the wording of the trustee and how that has to be altered. So we would have to do that. It probably would be timely to do that anyway. There's been a number of changes in trusts and charities, so it would be an opportunity for us to update the deed at the same time.
And Marie has started that process, so the timing is good.
Because I think some of the difficulty in getting trustees for the positions is that it is voluntary, and people, when they make inquiries, they find out the amount of time that is needed to be invested, and then they're not getting remunerated for that at all, even just, at a simple honorarium level. So I certainly support Councillor Hadfield's comments.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. What Councillor Short had to say in regard to trustees is an area that's concerned me for some time, and that we appear to have a problem recruiting trustees for that trust. Those trustees, some of them have been there for a long time, and there seems to be a turnover of trustees, and we can't recruit any. And yeah, I just question the long-term viability of it if we don't have ardent supporters of the park willing to stand up and be counted and serve on the board.
Thank you. I recall in the discussions with Kitchener Park trustees, they had similar concerns, but they felt it wasn't that the people were out there. They were keen to discuss different ways of advertising into different areas. So that may be well worth having a conversation. And they are aware of people who have some interest. So maybe that's a discussion we need to think about where is the best place for what this particular work, is. It's ecology, are there different places that we might attract people with that expertise? Councillor Campbell.
I wonder if you could just refresh my memory about the discussion we had earlier about this, and because I'm a bit confused whether we need to go through the exemption process. It seems to me it doesn't matter whether they're exempt or not, whether or not we put in a statement of intent and so on. Anyway, just reading the Local Government Act, it appears, I'm just wondering how complicated it is from a regulatory mechanism to put this through, because under Section 7 of the Local Government Act, it requires approval of the Governor General. Seems fairly extreme. Can you just give me a bit more info on the
Shane?
Yeah,
exemption?
No, the exemption, and you recall Council does a blanket exemption for a number of its CCOs, and the reason for that is that they're considered to be, of the size and the nature of what they do. They don't have to provide a statement of expectation, or we don't provide a statement. They don't provide a statement of expectation, we don't do a statement of intent. At the moment, the Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park sits under that and is covered by that exemption. What we're asking is for the council to say, well, we don't want to exempt them any longer, and to remove them from that blanket exemption, which is over a number of CCOs. And there's another paper on the order paper today addressing the same thing. So it's totally up to council, as it's council that gave the exemption in the first place.
Yeah, and I can see, I'd be interested, Marie, to tell us if we remove the exemption, does that put any extra administration or accountability reporting? I see potentially that could be a negative, but the positive is it helps streamline for both parties exactly what we are wanting, the outcomes we're requiring, and so it's very clear. And that's perhaps been a bit of an issue in the past.
Yes, that's the main purpose. And as far as reporting goes, it's still their 6 monthly report and their annual report, audited annual report, which they do anyway. And then up on our website, we would publish those reports. So we would just perhaps a bit more work in making sure that they're succinct for being published.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Do you think if we exempt them, that would hinder their chances of any grant applications because they wouldn't be quite so arm's length from council?
They're exempt now. This is to remove
remove the exemption, yes. If we made them a CCO, it brings them in closer.
But they are a CCO.
More closely associated. All right, okay. So it's just the reporting part.
It's really, just the exemption only applies to the letter of expectation and statement of intent. So they don't have to provide that. What we're saying is to put some structure around for them to know exactly what the council wants them to do, which gives them direction, and then for them to respond to council around how they're going to do it. It puts a framework which has been missing.
Okay, thank you. It is the first meeting after the holidays. I'm still a bit rusty.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you. I support what we're trying to do here with the recommendations. My question, following up from Councillor Campbell, is there an alternative way of doing it without having to remove the exempt status? I mean, we need to get on the same page, and I think that is that's the problem. This is one way of doing it, pretty formal way of doing it. Is there an alternative, or is this our only choice?
The Local Government Act gives us the choice, and that is to either exempt them or not. And if they're exempt, they don't have to go through the process. If we want them, the only way we can hold a CCO to account is to, well, we can do it two ways, but if we want to structure the way they go about delivering the service, we've got them there. It's through the letter of expectation and the statement of intent. If we're not worried about that, then we exempt them. And that's what we have done in the past. Yep. What we're saying now, and I think it will really be helpful for the trust, is for our, our governance team to give some guidance around what, we want from Awahuri Forest Kitchen Park. I think that's been missing in the past. What's the bigger picture? What's the actual plan 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years for that park? And I think that's where we can build it into that letter of expectation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, look, thanks, Your Worship. So I get all of that and I understand it. And I think Councillor Ford's question was quite appropriate, and Councillor Campbell's queries were also very valid. I'm still looking for an assurance that from officers that a proposal around honorarium for our trustees will be presented to council before I vote. So I'm looking for an assurance that can happen.
Potentially, could we add on to one of these recommendations, or add a new one to ask council to?
No, because that would be out of the spirit and scope of what the order paper's about.
Okay.
So I'm just looking for an assurance, Your Worship. That's all.
So if council directs me to go away and do that, then so be it. I'll do that. It's a council decision. And that's easy. You just need to tell me to do it, and I'll go and do it, and we'll bring it back.
So we don't need
a formal resolution.
Okay, thank you. So it doesn't need a formal resolution. So does everyone support the idea of having a look at what an honorarium might look like for this organisation and potentially the next topic we're talking about? Bring that back and have a look at it. And it is something we've talked about for a long time.
Your Worship, that would be a direct charge on rates, though, isn't it?
No, we need to discuss. There are options of how it's done. It could be that they take it out of their existing budget.
Or yes, it could be.
Or it could be. Yeah.
Most likely, I'd say.
So all of that detail needs to come back to us in a report. Okay, so on that basis, Councillor Underwood.
Something quite different. The skills matrix on 3.1, is that a generic matrix? It seemed to be the same for the next one as well, but you've noted at the top of the page that it's important for someone with ecological education knowledge, and yet I noticed that's not one of the skills that's listed there, and I wondered if that would be helpful to add that to that matrix.
That's a good point. I'll let it in.
Thank you. So based on the discussion that we will seek to get a report regarding an honorarium for our trustees, we have 3 recommendations there. And the first one we haven't discussed, I'm not sure whether we need to or not, is the process to fill the 3 vacancies. So do we have a mover and a seconder? And we can probably do all 3 together. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move that the council approves 1, that officers undertake a recruitment process to fill the 3 vacancies on the Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust. 2, that the council-controlled organisation exempt status for Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust be revoked. And 3, that officers progress a statement of expectation and agreed statement of intent in conjunction with the Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park trustees and council to be in place by 30 June 2024.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Short. Any further discussion?
I'll do the vote first. I just wanted to make a comment.
Thank you. So all of those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Councillor Short.
I wondered whether a good avenue of advertising would be through Environment Network Manawatū, yes, because it's actually a collaboration of many organisations of ecological and environmental interests, so you could find the right people there.
Great idea, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, that would be a perfect organisation to work through. So thank you for that. So moving on to page 35, 11.3, Feilding Civic Centre Trust, reverse CCO exemption. We've had the reasons behind this discussed. The Civic Centre trustees are aware that we're doing this and comfortable with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming, Councillor Hadfield, that your comments regarding to considering an honorarium apply to this one as well. Are there any questions or comments? No, it's pretty straightforward. So on that basis, is there a mover and a seconder for those two recommendations? Councillor Short.
I'd like to move that Council approves that 1, that the council controlled organisation exemption status for the Feilding Civic Centre Trust be revoked, and 2, that officers progress a statement of expectation and agreed statement of intent in conjunction with Feilding Civic Centre trustees and council to be in place by 30th of June 2024.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor McFadyen. I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Page 38, 11.4. This is the roading emergency works claim for the May 2023 event. So council needs to approve the local share of the cost for that response during the weather event. And noting there that our NZTA subsidy is at 71% for emergency works. So welcome, John and Hamish.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Hand it over to you.
Unlike an earlier speaker, we are asking council for money, not permission to get money from someone else. Over to you, John.
Right, so this is over and above the money that we required for the Cyclone Gabriel and all the other events. So we received that money, 9.8 million, and in 22-23 we spent 3.2 of it, and then a further 220,000 in this year, and the rest of it goes into the 24-27 LTP to build the Makiki Bridge and the Churchill Bridge. So that was all good, but then in May we had another event that took out the Pararorangi Bridge and caused some damage around the rest of the network. So we put a claim in for that in May to NZTA, and they finally approved it in December. So for the first 6 months of this financial year, we cleaned up the mess using the continuous maintenance money. So now that we've had that money finally approved, we want council to approve 618,000 for the recovery phase so that we can take advantage of the 71% FAR and then get on with our continuous maintenance program. And we want 100,000 to do the investigation and design of the Pararorangi Bridge. And then the balance goes into the next LTP, and we hope to build the Pararorangi Bridge, replace the Pararorangi Bridge in 25-26. So
when we developed the draft long-term plan, all the capital expenditure for those bridge renewals has been factored into those draft budgets. So we've pushed that money forward, knowing the timeframes for the build that John's outlined in section 7.10. And so this is just the catch up on the existing year's budget that we've now had approval for.
Yeah, up to 6 months.
Thank you. So a question I have, and it may be obvious, so that's to do the design for the new bridge. So the money to actually build the new bridge comes from where?
The money's been approved by NZTA.
Yes.
But that will be carried forward into the next LTP.
So, Helen, the table there I referred to, 7.10, that outlines the 1.754 million for the construction of that bridge. That's been factored into the draft long-term plan. 71% of that comes from NZTA, with the balance coming from MDC, and that's been factored into those budgets.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. As it is the beginning of the year, I got a bit confused. Just in terms of 7.7, the local share 29 grand referred to in paragraph 7.5 funded from the depreciation reserve. Is that the same 29,000 in 10.2 that's being funded by the renewal reserve?
Yes.
So
renewal reserve, depreciation reserve is the same thing.
There you go. Okay.
Sorry. Yep.
That's right. Thank you for that explanation.
And apologies for the misclarity there.
Councillor Short.
Thank you. I think it demonstrates the vulnerability of our roading network when we have extreme weather events. The Paerangi Road Bridge would serve how many properties?
Three properties up there.
Yep. And we had a similar one not far away up Arapata Road, what, 5 or 6 years ago, that served about 6 properties.
Served about 6 or 7 properties.
And it just emphasises, you know, with extreme weather events, just how vulnerable our roading network is. But, you know, if we were not to replace that bridge, you know, that leaves those people highly isolated. So, and just assuming we've got the media here today, we don't insure bridges, do we?
No, we don't at this stage.
But, you know, if this is going to happen, continue to happen at increasing events.
I think that point's really relevant in terms of the scale of the event. I mean, this was a site, the May event was its own individual event. The earlier one was a side swipe of a much larger event. So it does highlight the vulnerability of our existing infrastructure, plus also that financial risk if we do get hit with a large event. So that's partially recognised in the enhanced FAR at 71%. But yeah, this won't be the last time that we're talking emergency works funding. Either.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? No. So we have 2 recommendations there on page 38. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Short.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that 1, that Council approves an increase in roading operational budget for the 2023-24 financial year by $618,376, noting that $439,077 will be funded by NZTA and the balance of $179,329 will be funded by the Council Resilience Reserve. And that 2, Council approves an increase in roading capital renewal budget for the 2023-24 financial year by $100,000, noting that $71,000 will be funded by NZTA and the balance of $29,000 will be funded by Council Renewal Reserve.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadden. Any further discussion? Councillor Short.
Just a question in the wording. Did we agree as a council not to refer to NZTA as Waka Kotahi?
Yeah. Well, I noticed at the regional transport meeting for the regional long-term plan, it was Waka Kotahi, NZTA staff that asked them to change it to NZTA in the document. So my understanding is that's the direction they've been given.
Interesting.
So we have those moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Item 11.5, page 42. This is the application of the Common Seal. This is informing council of the documents that have been signed under Common Seal under delegations since the last period. So this is May to December. Morning, Francis.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors. So as Your Worship has described, this is an administrative matter relating to the application of the Common Seal, which relates normally to land, disposal or transfer or warrants to officers, which give them their official powers under our delegations manual. This 6-month period, we've got 30 related to warrants for officers and 1 related to the private plan change at Rangotia. If there are any technical questions, I will refer those to the relevant GM.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Underwood.
Some people have been given up to 3 warrants. Is that giving them powers under 3 different regulations, like dog control or noise control? Or
Shane's nodding. It's usually yes, it gives them specific powers. Like, for example, the power to enter a property is different from some other powers that they would be given under the warrant.
Right, I see. Thanks.
Thank you. And given the number that we see here, it's a question, is this higher than usual for a period of time? Just seems a lot.
I think it's about normal.
Yeah, normal.
Okay.
About normal.
Okay. Right. Any further discussion? Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move that the schedule of sealed documents from 24 May 2023 to 1 December 2023 be received.
Thank you. Have a seconder, please. Councillor McPidgeon. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. So we're on page 46, 11.6. Now, this is approval of the consultation document and all of the supporting documents to Audit New Zealand and the adoption of our significance and engagement policy 2024. So there's been a number of documents to read through. Some are new, some are our standing documents, albeit with some changes. And this is our opportunity to approve these to go through to audit. It won't be the last time we get to have a look at these, my understanding is. But I'll hand it over to Shane and the exec team. Welcome to you all. Welcome, Lisa. Shane.
Thank you, Worship. So I guess following up from my email that I sent out to all councillors last week, this is the next phase, if you like, of our long-term planning journey and the end of what we commonly refer to as phase 2. This is now seeking your approval for these documents to go to audit. And as the Mayor rightly said, this isn't your last opportunity to be able to have input into these documents. We will bring, as we go through the audit process, we will be bringing those back to Council on the 7th of March for the adoption of the draft annual plan to go out for consultation. And that's when we go out to the community and we seek submissions back, and then Council will hear those submissions in May. And we'll make whatever adjustments you decide, and then the final adoption of the long-term plan is in June. So the important point is this is just approving the documents for audit, and we still have a lot of opportunity to be able to add or delete or amend. Just a couple of other things I want to point out. The consultation document, that is in a Word format. It hasn't been, it is, if you like, it's the raw material. That's all the audit requires at this stage. It's not what the community will see. You will get a sneak peek this afternoon on the consultation document as it has progressed to date, but that's not the document that they will see, nor is this yet a draft LTP. It's just the release of these documents to audit. So does the team want to add anything else, Francis? No. Well, there's a myriad of them. Suppose probably a couple that we should bring to your attention that you won't have seen and you may have questions around would be the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy. One that was sent out by Amanda, which was the rates remissions policy. You had the opportunity to read that. The others, and it's in the report, and I think Lisa's going to work through a presentation in a minute. We have a link back to last year when you actually talked about or decided on things to do with those individual documents. And Dave and Lisa.
Thanks, Shane, and good morning, Your Worship and councillors. Get the clicky, Shane. Thank you. Yeah, so as Shane said, today's having you approve the supporting documentation for the LTP to go to Audit New Zealand for their review, and also to approve the consultation document. In general form, really, it does have to be designed up, and I've seen some sneak previews of that, and it looks pretty good, but we need the substance of that approved by you. For the supporting documents today, we'll do a bit of a pass the mic around, so different people will be speaking to each one. Just a reminder about what each of the supporting documents is about and when council talked about it, so you can refresh your memory about when it was presented. I will close out. I'll talk a little bit about the consultation document at the end, and then we'll go through our report recommendations and then cover off the timeline over the next few weeks. So the purpose of this presentation is to inform you of the supporting documents going to Audit, to gain approval for the consultation document and supporting documents to go to Audit, and also to adopt the significance and engagement policy. And I think Francis will talk to that pretty soon. Here's the list of, I'm flipping through my computer. Here's the list of supporting documents. I'll probably get the record for the longest paper ever. It probably added up to about 1,000 pages, but it shows the amount of work that you guys have put in over the past year in developing all these things. So well done. The ones up there with asterisks are new. Well, you haven't seen those before. Most of them you have seen. So we'll spend quite a bit of time just talking through the ones with asterisks, just so you know what's in those draft policies. A lot of the delay has been we've had to wait for decisions to be made by this table in order to pull together those final policies and strategies. So that's the reason it's the first time coming today. So let's kick into this. We'll flip the mic around and we'll get various people to talk to each one. Starting with Lisa.
Cool. Thank you and good morning, everyone. So the environmental scan, that was the first piece of work relating to the long-term plan that we brought to you. It essentially set the baseline for the long-term plan. So it kind of talked about the operating environment in which council was making decisions. So talked about kind of our trends around population and household growth, talked around legislative change and those things that were impacting on local government. It sort of helped to bring everybody on board to start at the same page as we move through to the long-term plan. So this document is not included in the long-term plan, but we did make it available for our early engagement, and it helped inform a lot of the questions that we asked our community. It will also be made available as we consult on the long-term plan. It was introduced in workshop in March, and the design version was released in April.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding that one? Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. It's not so much in regards to the content, but just noting it's not included in the LTP. Does that remain available for the community over time? Okay, I just kind of reflect back on often we have presentations from other groups in the community that used other assumptions about our district. It'd be really good if we could, have everyone assuming the same things about growth in particular.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Short.
Okay, so next is rates remission.
Oh, we just got a couple of questions. Councillor Short, then Councillor Ford.
So that's a snapshot in time. We're not adding any additional information. I had a question around whether we could make some reference to the Deep South project, climate change adaptation and mitigation at Tangamoana. Too late to put that in?
I think probably, the environmental scan was sort of the starting point for the long-term plan. So the intention's not to continually update that, but obviously other projects that are relevant could be woven into, a discussion around climate change. And I think Tangamoana is mentioned in other sections of the long-term plan.
Councillor Ford.
No, I think Lisa's just answered my question. Thank you. It was going to be, are there any significant changes that you've identified in the almost year since that came out? And I think you've already answered it. It's not the intention. So,
yeah, I think that the main changes would have been around Three Waters and the legislative change that's gone on. But that has obviously the current state of play is woven into the actual long-term plan documents.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good morning. So the rates, remissions and postponement policy, we did a presentation on this so that I took you through what our current remissions are. The most significant change in here is around the community housing rebate, and that became a conversation from last LTP where we were doing a development contributions policy, and the concept of giving a rebate for development contributions for developers doing community housing was floated with the public. It received, I think, a fair amount of support for the people that came through. But we did identify that giving a development contribution rebate isn't actually the best way of doing it under the current legislation that we have, because that would mean that the rates would need to prop up the balance of your development costs. So we talked about potentially giving a rates remission, and the intention was to incentivise and to assist community housing in those early stages. So this policy, the majority of it has not changed, but there is the new community housing rebate in there, remission in there. The key points in that is that the person, developer, whoever it is, would apply annually for a maximum of 3 years. The reason why we say annually is we will get development where the intention is community housing, so they'll get a rebate for that year, but then maybe it didn't become community housing and maybe the house got sold and it's not community housing anymore. So the next time that the rates come up, they reapply and we reassess. So I think it's quite important to have that revisit option. There's also quite strict criteria, I believe it's quite strict, to say that they do need to be a registered community housing provider. And that's a real easy definition. There's actually a register for that. And the other thing in there was that we've put in that it's for the maximum of 3 years, because the belief was that it's for incentivising and getting community housing up and going, recognising that you might actually build it and they might not have tenants to start with. And then after that, you kind of need to pay your way, in essence. That's only my word. So that's the main ones in there. The other changes that we've done in the rates remission is to standardise each of the remissions. It was a little ad hoc, so each of the remissions outlines the objective, why we're trying to do it or what we're trying to achieve, clearly outlines the criteria that the remission needs, how to apply for it. Some of it's automatically granted, some of it is you actually have to apply, and then the delegations, who is actually able to approve the remission. A couple of the headings, we changed the description so that it's more standard. So for instance, there was a remission around school PAN charges. It's actually not PAN charges, it's a wastewater rate. So we just changed the word to say that it's a wastewater rate remission for schools. So I believe it's more standard, but you haven't seen it until now. We've discussed it very briefly. We whipped through them and we were pretty comfortable. So you may want to have a bit of a discussion on that.
Councillors, just the one thing with this policy and to do with rates remissions is every remission you approve or give means that the balance is spread off through other ratepayers. So if you remit 50% of a rate, then the 50% you remit then gets taken and spread out across other ratepayers. So just keep that in mind. What's the total at the moment?
It's when I last looked, it was about 1.5 million. So it's 1.5 million that we say, in essence, this group or multiple groups don't need to pay, so therefore this group need to pay their portion. It's actually someone else paying for the portion. And I just forgot to note there was 2 other bits that I added into the policy, and that's noting the remissions or the non-rateable status of properties as noted in the Act. So there's various properties such as places of worship that are deemed non-rateable. So I've listed them. It's not a complete list, it's the part list. It's just to give an idea of actually what makes up our rates remissions.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Actually, when Amanda sent this little PowerPoint out, the first thing I looked at actually was the impact of rates remissions on 21, 1.3, 22, 1.4, 23, 1.5 million. It's actually being apportioned against ratepayers that are actually already doing it pretty hard. So my view is that other than legislative requirements, which obviously we're obliged to meet, is actually that we shouldn't actually remit any rates. And I think 1.5 million is a hell of a burden to push across, as Shane has suggested. Struggling ratepayers are actually paying for it. So I'm just going to put a peg in the sand and say actually we shouldn't remit any rates at all, other than those that we're legally required to do.
So thinking what Councillor Hadfield said, if you think that through and if we went down that path, what happens then? You end up with a whole lot of people who can't pay, aren't able to pay.
Just for clarification, my understanding is, and Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I have been known to be wrong 1 or 2 times, is that the government, for people that apply for the average Joe citizen that applies for a rebate under criteria set out, the government funds that, don't they? Through
Okay, so the rates rebates is, we did talk about alongside the rates remissions policy. The rates rebate is completely separate. Yep. Rates rebates, we rate the people, they apply to DIA and we get money.
Yeah, so that's what I presumed that a worship was referring to.
For the low income, yep. What I thought might be interesting is I will just quickly give you a heads up and a reminder of what was in the original presentation. So for our rates remissions, just general statistics, those properties that have additional dwellings, so you've got, because we have dwellings, there are potential that we have dwellings out there that people don't occupy, they get a potential remission. Farming is one. There's a few people around the table that might want to perk your ears up. Farming is one. So multiple farms that you're farming as one, you get a rates remission. Just thought I might mention that. It's very common in our rural district. Yeah. You have one farm, you're taking over, you're doing the lease, you're farming it as one property. That's a remission. Charitable organisations, those organisations that are helping our community, which we probably, one of your other options is we might not rate for them, but you may end up giving out more grants. You're kind of doing the same thing, right? But that's charitable organisations. School pan taxes, that's legislative. Small dwellings, there are dwellings in there that are particularly small and have a really small print. The one that comes to mind is Manawatū Community Trust. They get a particularly large rates remission for various rates remissions that they have, because as a council, you've said that as part of your priorities, you actually want to support that type of establishment. Can't think of another word of it right now. And there's some minor miscellaneous, but those are your key ones that we're actually using. Farming is one, additional dwellings, charitable organisations, and small dwellings are pretty much your biggies. And when we went through that, we kind of talked about each of them.
Okay, Councillor Short.
Thank you. I just wanted to inquire about QE2 land. Last year or the year before, when we had the district plan chapter review of outstanding natural features, which is due to become operative shortly, I believe. There was quite a lot of new tracts of land that were protected from farming operations. Mm-hmm. So there will be landowners out there who would probably put that land into a QE2 trust. What is the process for them? Do they have to apply once? Is it every 3 years? Is it guaranteed?
So I'd have to just go.
Because I think there is also some national legislation around.
Yeah, so there is a particularly strict criteria on that. I'm pretty sure once they go into QE2 land, that is it. You can't QE2 land your land. So once we know that that is the case, it is applied. And that is legislated, that one. So actually, I think they're deemed non-rateable. I'm not that au fait with the two terms. My rating team are more across that. But I think it's actually deemed as non-rateable lands. It's not actually a remission. They don't pay rates.
So as an aside, perhaps to the Chief Executive, when that goes operative, do those landowners then get a new piece of correspondence from us? And is there an opportunity in there to highlight to them that, because not everyone attended the hearing, so they didn't all hear about the QE2.
It comes through our rating database. If they have actually been classified as QE2, that piece of information comes through.
They have to apply, I believe, to become QE2. And what I'm getting at is, can we advise them that if their land is covered by outstanding natural features classification, that I don't know whether we use the word encourage, that we point them to the direction of they could apply to become a QE2 trust piece of land?
Look, I have to check on that. I don't know off the top of my head just what those processes are, but I can do and come back to you on that.
Because for some landowners, it was like over 100 hectares. So it was quite significant once it backed up onto Ruahine Forest Park, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Amanda, are you able to give us a ballpark as to which categories make up the lion's share of the $1.5 million? Because presumably there's a few rats and mice, if you like, but is it properties farmed as one? Is that 50% of it all, or 20%? I think it'd be quite interesting to know approximately where the money is going.
Yes. My problem is I'm not entirely au fait with the definitions that I'm looking at, so because I don't use those. The majority is about $550,000 worth. That's including GST, so just under 500K is farming as one. Charitable organisations around 300,000. The next kind of largest public utilities is around 550,000. School pan tax, tiny at 40. Small dwellings. So the majority of us farming is one. Charitable organisations and public utilities.
Thank you.
Worship, just something I'll point out. This is one of the policies that has to go out and be consulted on. Okay. So this is there's going to be a few bites at the cherry of this policy. So this is one of the policies we have, which we have to send out as part of our LTP consultation. So it'll be separately sitting there as a policy where we'll be seeking feedback from the community. So this really is just, we're sending it off to audit to say, does this meet the audit requirement? The content still has to go through the consultative process. So.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have confidence when we went through this process that we did it robustly, and in light of what Shane has said around public consultation, I think that we should wait. We should accept this, accept what it is at the moment, and we look at it when we go through the public consultation process.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I just wanted to fire the topic out there so that we can have a conversation about it. Doesn't necessarily mean to say that what I suggest is actually the right course of action, but I think it definitely requires conversation. And I think Councillor McFadden's quite correct in saying that there's still a process to go through, and we can come back to it through the consultation process. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Just a final question on that. So we go out for consultation on this. Do we include the information about how much the total amount of remission is? Because, you know, from a community point of view, they'll say, oh, yes, but then when they see the total amount of money, that's significant, that has to be made up from other ratepayers.
So your consultation issues, these are not one of the things you're consulting on as such. If you, in essence, if you wanted to, and I've seen a few other councils just recently, they are, as part of their consultation process, one of their items they are consulting on is to take out or to add a rates remission. We're not, at this stage, we are not proposing to take anything out. So I've seen no need to tell the public, by the way, this is worth this much, because we're not asking them to approve, like to tell us about that. The only thing we are asking, or the only thing we are consulting on, is the community housing rebate. And it's particularly difficult at this stage to quantify how much that would be, because we don't have anybody that would fit that criteria right now. So this was a recognising that going forward, there are some people, there are some entities potentially going through the CHIP process. And so therefore, this is a remission that we would potentially want to be giving, and also recognising that you, as part of the things that we've talked about, wanted to incentivise community housing, and this is one of the ways of doing it. But I don't have any information to kind of go, this is what we would be giving them, because I don't know number of properties, the number of anything really.
Thank you. I was just, well, maybe I misheard. It's just that I heard Shane say, this is one we're going out for consultation on.
Yep.
So my point was, if you're going out for consultation on, would we be adding the information about this is roughly the amount of money that it's been, even given the facts for the last 2 or 3 years of what it's actually worth?
Yeah.
Lisa.
Your Worship, we do have a paragraph at the bottom of the consultation issues and the draft consultation document that does note the key change that we're looking to make to the policy, which is the addition of the community housing remission. So we do point that out and say that this policy is also being consulted on in conjunction with the long-term plan. Whether that's sufficient information to inform the public to make submissions on that policy, we'll give that some more thought.
And Audit will tell us.
And Audit will tell us too, yeah.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions. So I note that the kind of criteria in the process to apply is fairly clear. And I just wonder why mostly the delegations to approve or decline sit really high, either with the Chief Executive or yourself, Amanda. So my question is kind of why do they sit at that level? And the second is for the small dwellings, I'm just a little bit unsure about the intention of that remission, and if you could just share a bit more about that one.
And talk about the delegations first. And it's more about it's about an operational process at the moment. For 99, actually I'd say nearly every single one of these remissions, they go through the rates team. They come through from a senior rating officer. She does pretty much all of the investigation and recommends to me. I am therefore just checking that the documentation is right. I'm also keeping a bit of an eye that, you know, it's not a conflict of interest. There's no related party potential with the rating team and whoever it is that's applying for the remission. So I'm kind of doing that glaze over. Very seldom it goes to Shane from an operational view, but the miscellaneous remission absolutely goes to Shane. On our recommendation, like we'll look and go, sometimes we've gone to Shane and said, I don't recommend this, but it is absolutely his call. That is the one remission that absolutely goes to Shane. The others, just from an operational view, they come to me and I'm doing that administrative more check.
I just wondered if I was missing something.
No, it's good in these types of, when we're dealing with these financial processes, that there is that segregation between those who are assessing the application versus those approving. And I think when we're dealing with community money that's being remitted, it's right that it sits higher in the organisation as a final sign-off. So I'm quite comfortable with the way it's structured. And as Amanda said, you know, our rates people do a really good job putting it together and in a report, and then she will sign it off based on the criteria, or it will escalate to me. So I think given the importance of it and the money that's involved, it's right that it sits something.
Okay. And the small dwellings?
So small dwellings, there's a bit of history to this actually. Small dwellings used to be known as granny flats, but we had to change the name because people didn't think it was the right terminology. So, and they were typically exactly that. They were a little building that sat on the back of people's properties. And so, you know, it was exactly that, where there might be an elderly parent or someone or living out as part of the main household, but wanting that separation. So that came in, and the 65 square metres was derived around a bit of an investigation. The building team went out and said, well, what size is typically these flats? And it was around 65 square metres. So the intention was that, well, really, what was the difference between the person that was living in the smaller outbuilding versus if that person was living in the house? And so the rates of remission was evolved from that.
Okay, so it's not really things like where you might have multiple, like not quite community housing, but small properties close together.
No, it was intended that it was a member of the family rather than a property that was being rented out or deriving an income from.
Unfortunately, it does actually apply to Manawatū Community Trust because they have some units that are particularly small. So the intention was potentially the granny flat, but it's actually applicable to one of our community housing providers.
Yep. Thank you. Nothing further on that one.
Revenue and financing policy, me again. So this one is, this policy is the one that really talks about who pays and why. So this is linked to our rating system. This is where we went through and we, as part of the LTP process, you identified that our rates, if we leveraged more or put the cost back onto the user rather than our ratepayer, this is the policy that allowed you to do that. So the key changes in this policy are around our funding splits. This is where we talk about funding splits. So our funding splits with regard to some of the regulatory areas. So our consultation issues around the roading differential sits in here. The consultation issue around the funding split for building, consenting and animal control, this is the policy that it sits in. This is the policy that says this percentage is funded from this type of rate, this percentage is funded from this type of user fee. It's a two-step process that you go through under legislation to say, what do we need to do? Who can pay for it? Who gets the benefit? That kind of thing. We did a couple of presentations on this on September and December, obviously, but this is actually the meaty part that actually drives the rates. What else did I want to talk about in there? So the key ones, so CBD development, the development rate that was hitting predominantly the CBD. One of our consultation issues is to put that onto all ratepayers. The building consent, the building services, the consenting, the animal control, and the roading differential. This is the policy that those sit in. We also updated a couple of rates that were actually not listed in the existing policy that were pointed out to us by Audit. So the ultra-fast broadband project and rate that is targeted for a particular area of where that service was put in, and the capital contributions targeted rate for Rangatira and Hamatangi, which is a rate we've had for quite a while, but it actually just wasn't listed in the policy. So now we've gone through and listed every rate that we had and the reasons why we have it. Any questions from that?
No, that's pretty self-explanatory.
Liability management policy. So this policy we adopted, it's almost the same as it was at the last LTP. There was only one key change, and that was around liability. Yep, let's make sure I got the right one. That was around the fixed and floating debt bands. I was having a moment there. So this is a policy that outlines how we manage our debt, what we're allowed to do, and how, that's actually all it does. So we took that through a workshop and you adopted it on the 7th of September, and the key change was that we moved the fixed and floating rate band. So those are bands that say we should have X amount of fixed and X amount of floating debt over each of these periods, and that's about hedging your liability and your risk. It's your risk matrix. Anybody got any questions around that? No. Cool.
No.
The next one is the investment policy. Again, this policy we were predominantly happy with. There was only one change, and that is we gave yourselves the ability to purchase land as an investment option, whereas very clearly previously it said land would not be purchased for the sole intention of investment. So that means that if you had opportunities come up in the future, you actually have allowed yourself to consider it as an investment opportunity. The rest of the policy was left alone. Any questions on that policy?
Councillor Ford.
Thank you. So when I'm looking at the policy on my screen, and I go to 3.5 investment properties, Council has resolved that properties will only be acquired and held to assist in achieving the strategic objectives of Council. Accordingly, Council does not involve itself in acquiring properties purely for investment purposes.
Yeah.
Is that the copy that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, so that clause was specifically taken out of the policies. We may have issued the wrong one. That bottom line was completely taken out.
Yeah.
We will update that. Can we note that it'll be updated? That bottom line that says solely for interest purposes was removed. So you were giving yourself the ability to purchase it to meet your priorities, and you could do it for investment purpose.
So I thought, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good catch. Well, we must have uploaded the wrong policy. Sorry, they're so alike because it's only the sentence that was changed.
It does say 1944 on here.
Does it? Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, back when I was born. Yeah.
Somebody's birthday. Three Waters Asset Management Plan. And so the next three slides effectively cover off all of the asset management plans. So we've talked about these at length, I think. Essentially, the asset management plan talks about how we manage the respective assets. It's around the life cycle management, the maintenance, the depreciation, the capital renewal in terms of fixing it as it breaks, fixing it before it breaks. It talks about, in this case of Three Waters, we talk about drinking water standards compliance. We talk about environmental compliance for our wastewater. And so the asset management plans essentially outline what we do, how we do it, and why, and what it's going to cost. So they're quite meaty documents. The Three Waters Asset Management Plan, which covers obviously water, wastewater, and stormwater, future investments and the like, as well as that changing sort of landscape for climate change, climate events that we need to factor in. Same for roading in the next one as well. So I'm happy to talk any specifics on Three Waters or roading, and Lynn's down there for the community facilities. But I think the purpose and the structure of asset management plans is reasonably well known. We have seen the drafts. The work that we did in the lead up to Christmas in terms of the budgets and the prioritisation, those updates have been made in terms of the investments and how much money is going in. We did have to shuffle a number of things around in terms of making the budgets fit, whilst not losing sight of those priorities around drinking water compliance and resource consent compliance and renewal. So happy to take any questions on either Three Waters or roading, or Lynn will pick up the community facilities.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, look, just actually nothing to do with the waters actually, Hamish, but I'll just note on page 20 on the list of community committees that Glenaroo Takari is missing.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, you know,
sorry,
I am the liaison councillor, so it would be pretty poor if I hadn't picked that up, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you didn't pick up the other one. Beaconsfield shouldn't be there, but I did notify Ash.
Well, I was just looking at that, Alison, but I was waiting for you to.
Just to show I read it.
All 300 pages of each document. And we talked there about levels of service. So the levels of service are captured in the long-term plan, and the asset management plan outlines how we meet those levels of service.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hamish, I did notice under the Stanley Halcombe Rural Water Scheme, the 3.8 million, you've got protozoa compliance only, but that's not the only issue that we're having to fund. We may need to list out the other.
No, you're quite right. The 3.8 million includes budget allowance for the other raw water intake issue subject as a result of Cyclone Gabrielle. So if it's not specifically referenced in the right spot, we can include that. But the budget is allowing for the protozoa compliance and the raw water turbidity issue as well.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, because we've already, of course, had some grant towards the protozoa, and we need to now explain why it's all sitting under the protozoa.
Thanks, Councillor.
And for what Hamish said, for community asset management plans, you'll recall that Carl and Sam presented the principles and themes around our community assets to you in October last year across the 6 different areas that range from parks and reserves to public conveniences. There is some growth activity and a small number of new projects, but these plans are largely renewals, which are funded by depreciation, of course, on our existing assets. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Underwood.
I read that some aren't funded by depreciation because they're not intended to be renewed when they get to the end of their life. So what criteria is that like for a park?
Not
community. Yeah, no, it's just halls because it just mentioned parks as well in there, and I wondered if it was
okay.
If we're going to use the park for another purpose or something.
The depreciation funding, we talk about part funding halls and part funding parks and reserves. The halls, the ones that aren't funded are specifically because we would not renew them, and that came through your halls policy. But for parks and reserves, the 50% funding is linked to the assumption that those areas are the ones that are kind of sitters for third-party funding. So we recognise that when we need to do things in that space, generally you can get some third-party funding to help. So therefore, we don't rate all the depreciation of that, but we do rate for. We don't rate for the land, obviously, because you don't depreciate land, but for the structures on it, 50% is funded by rates.
Thanks. I understood about the halls, but I was just wondering about the parks.
Nothing else. Councillor Ford.
Hamish, just going back to water and Armidale, has there been a change in thinking? It just seems to be been a bit of a softening of wording in relation to the future of Armidale. So I'm just interested to get an update.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. When the Feilding water resilience program was put together back in the 2018-28 LTP, we had 5-year plan to have everything done. Over that period, obviously, we've had a number of disruptions and we've talked many times around how costs have increased. So essentially, the timeframes involved in doing that have been pushed out a lot. And so we've probably softened it in terms of a hard and fast end date to Armidale, more so than the intent to completely, more so than doing something different like continuing the use of it. So we do have some properties that are fed off the line along the way. And so there's still a decision to be made in future years as to whether we completely shut Armidale and feed those properties from Feilding, or whether we have a much reduced capacity at Armidale and essentially close down large chunks of the capacity and just provide those properties in there. And then potentially there's other properties that could connect. So that there's still a decision to be made there, but the intention is to move away from relying on Armidale as a key supply for Feilding and replace it with the existing Campbell Newbury Line bore and the new Root Street bore, which is in the next couple of years for production.
Thank you.
Okay, forecasting assumptions. So these set up the risks underlying our financial estimates. They also are kind of the backbone for the long-term plan. So they set out our forecast growth, all of our financial assumptions, our assumptions around legislative change, changing land use. There's a lot of them, I think 26 or 27 of them. You have seen them all at various points over time. We've sort of drip fed them as they've become available. The only assumption that you haven't previously seen is the achievement of capital works program, because we needed to confirm the capital works program before we could confirm that assumption. So that's the only new one. Yeah, happy to take any questions on those.
No?
All right. I was trigger happy.
Just close your eyes for a minute.
Close your eyes.
You wish, but I'm feeling giddy.
That's Amanda's animation.
Animation pages, so that was it. Okay, so the rating system. this is a little dear to my heart. This is, you know, an important part of the document. This is the output, you know, all the policies, all the decisions that you make. This is the bit that the ratepayer actually is impacted by. Part of it means also user fees. So this rating system explains about, in I hope, plain English, what we're rating for, who we're rating for, and what are our assumptions. So it is taking the existing proposed budget that we have and calculating the actual rates that would be struck. If you made no further changes to the budget, this is what it would be. Okay, and it reflects the changes that you've got in the consultation document around the roading differential. It has the parking enforcement in there, it has the changes to CBD, it has any changes to the funding splits. This is the proposed view rates, if that makes sense. Yep. It is legally reviewed, and I've actually taken exactly the legal reviews template from last year, and we've exactly used that, but it will still go through legal review before we actually finalise it. But I expect that as was robust last year, we haven't made any changes. I expect it to be pretty good. What else is there? That's it, actually.
Okay. Questions, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I mean, saying that, you mentioned we're going out with a suggestion that we remove the roading differential. The document here, though, doesn't reflect that, I don't think, because it's still got the roading differential listed in there. So it's only a suggestion at this point. It's not, you know, a proposal.
Yep.
Yeah, so it indicates there's a fair bit of work to do on this. Yeah, in terms of analysing the numbers and the effect.
So what you see in this particular rating system is the proposal option, the proposed approach, which is the staged phasing out of the differential.
You got me wrong. I think I'm referring to the document that's here and in the attachments. The
attachments, which has the rating system.
2J rating system. That's unchanged from what we've currently got.
In the differential table?
Yeah. You're still listing the general rate, the Parks and Reserves rate, and the roading rate.
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing, because it's only the roading rate that we are proposing to change. The rest of the differentials stay the same, and the roading differential phases out over 3 years. So there's still a differential, but it's a third of what it was before until we get to year 3, where the differential is a 1 flatlined across everybody, in which case there is no roading differential.
I'm sorry, I didn't match this document back to the current LTP, but you've altered the figures.
Altered the differential to phase out.
On the basis of a phase out over 3 years,
yes.
Correct? Okay.
To get to a 1, only on the roading rate. So this is year 1 of the phasing out over 3 years of the roading rate differential. So ideally, at year 3, there'll be 111, which means everyone's paying their capital value based rate.
Correct. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Anything further? Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. It's really just based on what you've explained there. I'm wondering when this goes to consultation, whether how that stuff is cross-referenced. So the people reviewing the documentation won't look at one thing and go, but actually over here it still looks the same.
Yeah. So the consultation document is that, to be perfectly fair, consultation document's the bit they're going to read, and it outlines it in there, which is the bit you're going to hear. You'll see at the end. You know, there might be 5 of us that read this, but this is outlining what the rate would be based on what we've proposed in the consultation document. This is what it would be. It is explained, I think, better in the consultation document because it clearly reflects year 1, 2, and 3, and it reflects the option of a completely take it off in 1 year versus take it off in 3 years versus do nothing. That's the consultation document.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't kind of add this is 3 versions of this going
no.
this year, next year.
Yeah, we do kind of in the consultation document of just that snip. This is the supporting documents, which probably no one else reads but us.
Correct.
So sorry, in the legal team, but yeah.
Well, that'd be correct, wouldn't it? Because I'm presuming documents 2A through to 2S are not being made public.
Oh, they are. Yes, they are published. But I'd say the 99.9% of people will read the consultation document. Correct. It looks prettier as well, and it's easier to read.
Yeah, so I did note the consultation document, and you have spelled it out what we're proposing to do pretty clearly in there. So yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, performance management framework. So this is essentially for each of council's activities. It sets out the levels of service and then the measures and targets that we're measuring to check that we are meeting that level of service. There is in the attachments that you have, the performance management framework you see is what Audit will receive. So that is essentially the rationale for any changes that we're looking at making to our measures and targets. What actually the public will see is the activity statements. So for each activity, we set the measure of the levels of service, measures and targets. So this document that was produced essentially for Audit, and yeah, it's repeated in the activity statements that goes into the long-term plan.
Yeah. Any questions, comments? No.
Funding impact statements. So these are, sorry, because I've got such a quiet voice. So the funding impact statements, these form part of the activity statements. So yeah, you see. So you have the story of what it is that each of the areas do. And these are the financial statements that reflect what it is we're doing and how we're paying for it. So these are kind of, I'm pretty sure they're unique to local government. They have a section that outlines the operating expenditure, what it is we're spending, and then how we're funding it. Key thing being operating expenditure that needs to not be funded from debt. It's about, you know, you don't borrow to pay your groceries. The funding impact statement is the statement that you look at to go, are we doing this right? In the capital section, it outlines the type of capital expenditure that we're doing, so growth, new and renewals, and it outlines the funding sources that we have there, debt, renewal reserve and development contributions. And the very, if nothing else, you check the bottom and go, does it all come to zero? Because that means it's all funded in some way. And they do, I can tell you that, they all do. But so each of these funding impact statements is activity specific. So it's whenever someone says, how much are we borrowing in water, you can go to that statement and look at the debt drawdown line and you know how much are we assuming in development contributions, you can go to that statement. So that's the first point for any questions in the community of how are we paying for. This is the statement you go to or you come to me. So these are the activity-based ones, and then as part of our actual financial statements, there's the whole council one, which accumulates it together. Any questions on that? Yay, I must have done well.
Okay, back to me. Activity statements. So these are essentially the words that go with Amanda's financial statement. So it outlines the rationale for the activity that we provide and the levels of service and the measures and targets. So essentially describing for the public what it is that council does. Infrastructure strategy. Do you want to? Okay. So the infrastructure strategy is a 30-year plan for the management of roading and three waters, so water supply, wastewater, and stormwater. This kind of tells the story around what the challenges are that we're facing and how we are responding to those, and our plan going forward.
Yeah, and it's sort of back to back with our asset management plans as well. So there's a bit of, I suppose you'd call it repetition in terms of the two documents if you read them side by side. One of the key areas here is that if you look at that 30-year window in terms of infrastructure and investment, you need to line it up with what's our 30-year growth planning. So there's a very clear link here with some of our district planning and some of our zoning and some of that other work that we're doing in terms of where the district's going over the longer term. And so there's a reference in that document, if you ever look at it, in terms of the work that's been done around that growth thinking and planning, so that we can get a really clear alignment between where we want to be growing and then what level of infrastructure investment we're going to put in place to support that over that 30-year period. And it's typically broken down into sort of a 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 30, and it gets less accurate the further you go out. And obviously there's a 3-yearly review of that as you go. So it's intended to be a sort of a higher level strategy. It's been heavily reworked since last time.
Any questions, comments? None?
So the financial strategy, these are the wise words of how we're going to pay for it, what our strategy is around paying for for what we intend to do. Proposals for funding, and this one you haven't seen before. This is a combination, really. We introduced it, but we really pulled it together early in this new year because of the decisions and guidance you gave us towards the end of last year. So we were able to do that. So actually, there's not really a lot of change to what the last LTP financial strategy was.
This is the policy that you talk about how you're going to respond to the challenges from, for instance, the environmental scan. So this is the policy that outlines that we're rating for a resilience reserve, which is not new. We did that last LTP. This is the policy that talks about how we, under legislation, we have to do that, to be fair. What is our debt cap, which we have in the liability management policy. It also pulls through to here. So this is where we've said we're abiding by the LGFA's debt cap criteria. This is the policy that outlines what your rating cap is. So this is the place where you change the rates cap from a 3 to a 5%. This is a policy that contains that. This is also the policy that talks about why we underfund or unfund depreciation specific areas, because the assumption is also around affordability, but also that we're getting third-party funding or that we won't be renewing, kind of pulls it all together into this policy. So if you don't read anything else, read this one. It's my favourite. Okay. So Hamish would like you to read the infrastructure one, but yeah, this is the key policy that brings that all together.
Question. Are you coming back to are you going to cover off the financial statement document in here?
We are going to the financial statements. That's one of the next sections. Yep.
We had that discussion.
I'll ask the question then.
Cool. Okay, the question we're just asking here in the financial strategy, the proposed rate increase, 7.9, is it 7.9 or is it 7.09?
7.09.
Because we've got it and we've got it as different in two different places.
I've looked at it 100 times.
I think it was 7.09.
Yeah, that's right.
Presented to council at the end of.
Well, the blurb that David helped me write for the start says 7.09, but on page, it doesn't have a page, in this financial strategy it says 7.9.
And I'm pretty sure it's 7.9. I'm pretty sure we got it under 8% by getting to 7.9, not 09.
No.
I'm just thinking back to the presentation we did account, but we'll find out.
We just need to double check because it says it's different. The opening document for the consultation document says 7.09.
I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's 7.9. Yeah, 7.9. We got it to under 8%, which was really good, but I will double check.
Okay. But whichever one it is, one of the documents will need to change.
Yeah.
And just again, is it an average rates increase?
The total rates increase.
We're going to go away from average.
Yeah.
Yes, we are moving away from average. So it's 7.9% increase for existing ratepayers. So once you've taken out the growth of additional people properties, and it is the total rates increase required by council
across the
district.
Yeah. Yep. Total rate rates.
So some will pay more and some will pay less.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also particularly difficult because people subdivide, amalgamate, their capital values change. It's particularly difficult.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Underwood?
I'm just looking at the net interest ratios. Net interest as a percentage of annual rates revenue. So it's saying that it's okay to use 24% or up to 25% of rates revenue to pay interest on loans. Is that what it's saying?
Sorry, it's a benchmark. So you recall we talked about in the liability management policy, we talk about what is the maximum debt that we can borrow up to. And one of the 4 measures that the local government funding agency gives us is interest to rates threshold. Now, there's four of them. We have to use the one that we trigger the first. So, and that one is interest. Is that? But ask Joel, who lives in this space all the time. It's revenue. It's revenue to debt. Revenue to debt. Yeah, thanks. So we trigger the first one. So the other ones are kind of not relevant because we trigger the first one. We can't go past that. But for other councils, it's different. But we trigger the first one, which is revenue. So increased revenue, you can borrow more. That's a horrible portion of it. So the interest measure is not relevant to us because we can't actually get past the revenue one first.
It's the most conservative of the four.
Yes, that's the unconservative of four options.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? That one?
Oh, heck. I forgot to open that one. Okay, so these are the benchmark graphs. Oh, I did write some notes on those. These are the legislated benchmarks graphs, not the ones that we choose. These are the ones that legislation says that we need to do. The key ones in there is the rates increase as a percentage. One of the graphs talks about it as shows it as a percentage, and another graph shows it as a dollar value. So you're sitting there thinking, what are these two different? One is dollars, one is as a percentage. It talks about against our policy. So quantitative limit, I think it's called. That's actually our policy. What does our policy say? So we're compliant across all years of the LTP. Then there's another graph that's called the balanced benchmark. Now, this is a really important graph because this is in essence saying, are you breaking even? From a real basic point of view, are you breaking even? So is your operating expenditure being covered by your operating revenue? And it is not. It isn't. And there are a couple of scenarios where under the Local Government Act, it's allowed. One of the reasons is if you were choosing to use reserves, so money that you've received previously that was unspent, you would therefore budget for a deficit because you're using your cash and bank kind of bringing it forward. We do have some of our reserves being used. We always look across that. The biggest one, though, is the fact that we're unfunding depreciation in some areas. That means that the depreciation in the top line is going to show as an expense, but there's not revenue coming in from that from rate to offset it. So therefore, we're budgeting to make a deficit. Deficit means we've got an unbalanced benchmark. I'm hoping that kind of makes sense. So that means we are not breaking even because we've made the conscious decision not to break even. And that's particularly around the unfunding in the community assets space, 50% or not funding at all, or use of reserves. Is that concern?
Councillor Campbell.
That's something we've only ever done once before, I think, in 1 year. But in this LTP, we're looking to do it for the first 3 years of the LTP cycle. I'm always nervous about anybody doing a budget with a projected deficit. And if we look at page 1 of the financial statements, in the financial statement document 2.0, we're projecting a 2.3, 4.7, 3.7 deficit for the first operating deficit for the first three years. So, yeah, it's a bit of a concern for me. It's not something we want to do on a long-term basis unless we've got a lot of reserves held, and we don't really.
So, yes, you're quite right. We are budgeting for a deficit. However, it's not a cash deficit. So if you look at our statement of cash flow, we're okay. So this is recognising that the non-cash expense, which is recognising the current generation's use of an asset that we have possibly consciously decided not to renew in the future. So this generation will get the use of, say, the hall, but going forward, there won't be any hall left because we don't require it, or the community doesn't require it, and therefore we're not going to get the funds in to renew that asset. So your deficit, we have done this in this is the existing policy that we've had across previous LTPs, and we have had deficits budgeted in previous LTPs. It's quite common. It's not very often that we haven't budgeted a deficit, because as soon as you unfund depreciation, you're budgeting a deficit in essence.
Councillors, if you recall, we had quite a conversation about this last year around depreciation, and it was if we were to fully fund depreciation, we were going to add something like about 7% to the rates. We have, especially in the community area, had that policy around 50% of halls and for quite some time now. So that, and actually those balance benchmarks have been raised by Audit in the past, and we've been able to satisfy them that, you know, we're doing the right thing. So it is a way of us being able to manage that, that rate calculation. And to be fair, you know, if we don't do that, we could potentially take money through rates and put it in the bank account and not use it. And I don't think that's right.
Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding is that in effect you're using the depreciation to write off those assets that you're not going to replace to basically remove them off your balance sheet.
Partly, or we're recognising that someone else will pay for help us pay for them. Yes. I just want to go back because I've been pulled up by someone who knows it more. Thank you, Joel. It is 7.09% is your rates increase. The rates cap is 7.9.
That's actually what you actually told. That's what we.
Good, yay. Thanks, Joel. Oh, far out. Okay, sorry about that. I was like,
you were just sneaking in a bit more.
Yeah, is it all right if I just add a bit more in? I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it. 7.09 is your rates after growth is taken into account.
Councillor Ford.
Amanda, can I question the first graph, benchmark graph? The green bars, it says that they exclude new levels of service and growth, but the percentages seem too high.
I would have to just pull. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up because I haven't seen it. I've got too many tabs open now. Has anyone got it open at the table?
So just open up the benchmark graphs document, and it's the first thing. Rates increases, affordability benchmark, and there's a black which gives us our limit. In the green goes proposed rates increase, but the script above says the quantified limit is the local government cost index plus 5%, excluding significant new levels of service and growth in ratepayer numbers. But I'm questioning the green, which is, I don't know, it looks closer to 9% than 8% for the first year.
Yeah, it looks like it actually is including the growth factor in there, but I will double check that.
Okay.
Yeah, it does look like it has got the growth factor in the percentage bar. So thankfully, this is one of the things auditors look at 100 times, but it does look like it does have the growth factor in there, and the specific says that it excludes growth.
Yep. So either way, we either explain what it is carefully, and you'll have heard from me 100 times before that I would much prefer, if we're allowed, to show it as excluding growth.
And this one is
levels of service if possible.
Legislated, so we will make sure we're matching whatever the legislation says. But just looking at it very quickly, I'm like, it actually does look like the graph number, the first graph is looking that it is including growth. So we'll just double check that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, the term affordability is used quite a bit. So it's in these benchmark graphs, it's in the consultation document. It's a very subjective measure. And so some people might read that and think, you know, 7.09, what planet are they on? Has that been affordable? Is there, mindful I'm new to this, the term affordability is probably used across the country, different councils can help for comparison, but is there just a bit of background that you could share on that use of that term?
For that particular graph, it's legislated, and that's the word they use.
Thank you.
We have absolutely had that conversation around how subjective that affordability is.
It's also in the LTA principles.
Yeah.
And you did right. It's something that
doesn't mean it's right.
We've had a long conversation about, because depending on where you might sit in the community, affordability is
different. Yeah.
But it's legislative.
Has anybody raised that with the powers that be to say?
Because they listen.
Okay.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. So accounting policies. So these accounting policies have gone through the Audit and Risk Committee. There was a slight change to them because there was a change to the accounting standards, and it's outlined in the report that we're going through. These are audited every year at year end. So if anything happens during the year, we tweak them accordingly. It outlines our treatment, the way that we treat things, what our depreciation rates are. This is the exciting stuff for people like Stuart and I. This is actually it's all across it. But yeah.
That's why only you and Stuart will have.
I'm just like it is what we're supposed to do. I mean, we do tweak them as they come through. If we get better information or we get better regulations that come through, we have to update them. Okay, flick a button. Financial statements. Oh my goodness. Right. So the financial statements, these are the meaty part that actually shows what we're doing financially, obviously, not from levels of service point of view, how we're funding things, what our cash flow is, pulling it all together. These are our financial statements. I have not memorized them all. So yeah, if you have some questions, I will maybe answer them or I might come back with you, but they're standard, they come through. And also the notes of the financial statements. I think those are, a lot of the questions are generally, if you flick to the note, it'll explain it in more further detail.
Yep. Yeah, I've got one.
Councillor Campbell.
Just note the first page, the projected gains on revaluation of property, plant, equipment are pretty high each year. We've had a lot of ups and downs over the years. They do tend to vary a bit depending on economic conditions, but yeah, those figures to me do look pretty big.
Yeah.
30,000 plus per annum. What's the basis of your assumptions there?
You recall that our basis of our assumption is based around barrel. So as part of our forecasting assumptions, I think it is, we talk about what is our inflation rate, what is our interest rate, and what is our revaluation assumptions. Previously, we've bantered around with looking how much our revaluations have been on an average previously. They go like that kind of stuff. So what we decided as being a valid assumption was to use the Burl indices, so the inflation cost price indices for local government. They may be right, they may be wrong. It's blooming difficult. We have a large asset base and we revalue annually for our 3 waters and 3 yearly for our land, for our buildings and land. And roading, roading, small thing, but roading, the biggest one. So yeah, that's what they are. And they are based on a ton of assumptions. Also, if we revalue more assets than previously, which is what we have done previously, we've added to our revaluation schedule, the revaluations increase.
I suppose in reality, 33 million on 1.3 billion of assets is not that much.
No, I'd like it to stay not that much, but yeah.
Councillor Belsky.
I read back further, it might even be in this, that we are, through our borrowing of the finance company, we are actually also accountable for other debts of other councils. And when you look at council's financial position, do you look across the board at other districts that were under the same lending policy?
So have you been reading the local government funding agencies?
It was just in one of these I read where we have to guarantee the debts.
As a guarantor.
Yeah, as
right.
a guarantor.
I did a presentation around the local government funding agents. I think I did. I'm sure I did, but okay, good. I was just having a moment going, did I? That talked about, so as a guarantor, technically yes. However, you'd also want to point out that one of the other guarantors is actually the government, and the likelihood of that ever being drawn on,
okay, no,
the reason being a guarantor also gives you a better interest rate as well.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that, but it also puts us in a position where, as ratepayers, could be responsible for another district's debts.
Particularly unlike, I just can't see it. We do get reports I want to say regularly, but it's probably 6 monthly. It might even be more regular around the performance of the local government funding agency.
Yeah.
And they're particularly doing well. But yeah, we do get those reports. We're also invited to the AGM. We are able to nominate people to go on it. What they call directors, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely not out there, and we don't know what's happening in that space.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
The line on subsidies and grants revenue year on year, what's that associated with? Is that particular projects where we're anticipating certain subsidies?
Particularly it's the roading New Zealand Transport Agency. Predominantly it is that.
Okay.
We do get some other subsidy and grants, but in reality, I think across the life of that, it is pretty much waka kotahi, NZTA.
Right.
Particularly if you compare it to historically, you're like, whoa, it's dropped. And we had a whole lot of, free money being handed out through the Three Waters areas and stuff like that. So the subsidies and grants are linked to our capital program, and they're linked to our contract and contract assumptions around NZTA grants.
Okay.
And just add to that too, the NZTA base funding, as we talked about this morning earlier, in terms of the main maintenance program, that is the bulk of those subsidies. So if there's going to be variation and additional monies coming in during the LTP, it's going to be those emergency works outside of sort of one-off government initiatives. So 71% of a $10, $20, $30 million emergency event is going to be significant amounts of NZTA capital subsidy. So that is basically where it comes from.
But we don't budget for the emergency works because we don't know what's going to happen. We only budget for the operational project.
Those figures are fairly solid in terms of an assumption.
They're as solid as much as the contract when it comes up for renewal. So every 3 years, I think it is, the NZTA contract comes up for renewal and you renegotiate the work programs. It's as robust as that.
Yeah.
3 year
new GPs.
3 by 3 by 3 rolling programs. We've got fixed rates plus inflation. So we've got a level of certainty for a 9-year period, reset every 9 years, which we've just done. So
approval.
Councillor Underwood.
So if I'm reading this correctly, we're projecting we've got about 105 million in borrowings now, and in 10 years we're looking at 200 million.
Are you looking at the FIS statement or are you looking at the balance sheet? So I'm not sure what page you're on.
Oh, I'm looking at the statement of financial position.
Oh, yep, the balance sheet.
Which is on, page 974 of the document list.
I think you're probably right, because you'll notice that our capital program, although we pay as we go, we still have repayments. We are projecting to carry on with our capital program in new, and you're also funding development contributions, some of that growth works coming through there. So I would not be surprised if that is the numbers. I have to double check, but yes.
So how do we, our ratepayer base, I saw in another document, was going to be up around 16,000 about that time. How with an increase of like 2,000 ratepayers and our loan doubling, how do we, foresee being able to meet the interest, and also how do we calculate the interest rate sort of 10 years in advance?
Yeah, so as part of your forecasting assumptions, we brought the bill indices, which gives us the drivers for our costs. That's our interest rates and also our cost of inflation. We also presented to you the current at the time assumptions around interest rates for both expenditure and for revenue, term deposits, and that was based from our Treasury advisor at the time. And depending on what day of the week or what time of the month, it can change, but it's the best advice that we've got at that time. Where you look to think about what is the impact in our ratepayer and how affordable, I hate to say that word, that's where your benchmark graphs come in. That's where you're looking at where is our debt, where is our rates, what is the impact. So that's where you're looking at those. Those are your measures to give you how are we going to be funding this. So you've got your debt projections on your balance sheet, and then you've got your graphs which are showing you what's the impact on the ratepayer as a whole, because your debt repayments and your interest is within your rates. And there's also the measures around your debt cap. That's what that's telling you.
So even though it seems like a huge amount of money, you've got everything under control.
I wouldn't say that, because it's based on assumptions, right? It's based on the interest rate. Our interest rate assumption is around 5 to 6% across the life of the LTP. However, you revisit these annually. So if things are going skewy and interest rates are hiking and costs are blowing out, you revisit this annually and you make a call to do something different. That's
and in 3 years' time, you do a new LTP.
Yeah, and I also notice on the cash flow statement that the last 5 years there's a increasing amount left over, and that's kind of built in for these kind of uncertainties, is it? Or
it's more than likely, because we don't particularly know very well what we're going to be doing in 9 years' time from an operational, like it's based on a ton of assumptions, right? And yeah, so that's our biggest issue, is that we do really a very robust year 1, 2, and 3, and year 4 onwards is a little bit less robust based on a lot of assumptions. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Sort of somewhat related to Councillor Campbell's previous question and comment around the gains on the revaluation of property, plant and equipment. My concern, and it's an ongoing one, is depreciation. Like at the moment, we're budgeting over 27 million for depreciation. Compare that to personnel costs, only 16 million, so 11 million less than personnel costs. Now, 27 million is 35% of total operating expenditure of 77 million, but by the end of the 10-year plan, that depreciation will have grown to over 59 million, which is 45%. So the situation is just getting worse and worse in terms of depreciation, which, and I'm still very keen to investigate ways of not being strangled by depreciation, which is how I feel that we are. And I know I'm not looking for an answer. It's an observation that it's not as if the percentage is staying at 35%. It's actually going to 45% of total operating expenditure.
I'll go there.
If anyone's got a comment, that's fine, but I'm not. It was more an observation and a concern.
Can you turn his microphone off just?
Councillor McFadden.
Thank you for solving that one for me.
I have a comment, Mr. Ford. I think we as a council, or
Councillor Ford, please.
Councillor Ford, you're still a Mr. Ford. I would prefer that we do have provision depreciation, so we don't get a surprise when we have to replace the assets. So this is future proofing, and this council made a decision a long time ago to actually invest and to depreciate. So we do have the money in the bank to replace the assets. If you want to pull the depreciation back, then when they come up for renewal, we're going to have a shortfall. Or you may have a shortfall.
So, okay, so we'll go back to what. Well, depreciation is the value of the asset, reduced over a period of time. The funding of it's a whole other conversation, how we fund it, but it's recognising through your assumptions, through the forecasting assumptions, what is the cost of this or the value of this asset going to be in future years? So that's your revaluation assumption. So the costs in here are driven by your assumptions of how much things are going to increase in value, and therefore how much it's going to depreciate over time as well. So there's a ton of assumptions in here. Yeah.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of other observations, perhaps comments for Councillor Ford and Underwood. Councillor Underwood, your question about debt. Just noting that over the 10-year period here, our interest to revenue ratio is going from 5.7% up to 7.9%. So, and the debt to equity ratio is going from 10% up to 12%. So, there's a gradual increase projected over the 10-year mark. So, may indicate we're looking to, two things. It indicates we're either looking to grow the district, faster than inflation perhaps, or we're possibly being a bit over ambitious, but we can review that from year to year, I suppose, but that's what we're projecting for this 10-year period. And then secondly, just on some of the other lines, I noticed over the 10-year period, we're looking to double rates revenue, but and a number of other revenues, but not other income. So we're not looking for any real sources of other income over the period of time. I would have thought with other income, that's things like rents or what else goes into that. But anyway, there's no real increase there. And then along with Councillor Ford's comments around personnel costs, not a great increase there either.
which seems a bit strange. I would have thought they were doubled in line with rates revenue.
Happy to take more. Look, again, the staff increases is based around your forecasting assumptions, which are based around barrel indices. So you've got your barrel indices going through there. Absolutely, Francis will take more if you want to add more into the salary budget line. You know, you revisit these every year, so those change. When it comes to other revenue, we budget for what we know, and yes, we could make some very large assumptions going forward that we're going to get some additional money from someone's bequest, as Cal has suggested. We should be going out for bequests, but how robust are those assumptions? You know, we could make some pretty out there assumptions, and then you get to that year and you're like, whoa, this is a bit weird. So we budget for what we think is robustly able to be assumed, but heck, we are out there searching for any other money as well. We'll take it.
Look, it's no secret that one of the biggest challenges facing local government is the funding and financing of local government. And it's well acknowledged through the sector that rates isn't working. I think it's a big conversation topic with the new coalition government. Where it leads to, I don't know, and I don't think any of us will know that. But it's definitely going to have to go on the table, because essentially that third-party funding or that other funding has come through government. So when you're talking about sizable amounts of money, I mean, we could pick up the odd 40, 50 grand here or whatever there, but, you know, when it comes to actually having to reduce rates, you're not talking about $30,000 or $40,000. You're talking millions of dollars. So there's a bit of, I think, quite a bit of water to go under that bridge over the next few years as to how we might tackle that in the future as a sector, but also as New Zealand Inc.
Okay, so if there's no more on that one, financial statements, can I suggest that we adjourn for morning tea and come back, because there's still, what have we got, another 5 to go. And so let's take a 10-minute break and come back.
Got the
Oh, that was good. Needed that.
Did your move
Didn't
go
need to
okay,
stand
well,
up
at
though.
How's your head?
It's been
Was good.
good balance. I'm surprised we had to get a divorce. We're in now, and now it's just a matter of adjusting to a very small space.
Yeah.
I mean, we wanted it, but the reality of going down such a huge amount.
You're keeping your camper van though, eh?
Yeah. So when if Regan comes home, you can screw all that down.
Yeah. I mean, you can go away for the weekend if you're feeling like the walls are closing in.
Well, that's true. But we've got an elderly dog and an elderly cat, and the dog had a fit a few small when we moved in.
But has the dog been coming over with you looking at the... Yeah, she's been coming in. Because we were surprised because we didn't move very far either, not quite a shorter distance to do. We're about 500 metres. And all our animals transitioned really well. We were really surprised. We thought cats would keep going back to the old
Just
place.
give us a yell if you want me to.
Because it's just across the paddock. They didn't.
Yep.
Our cat did. He stayed up during the day if we were up here, but we were going back cleaning all the time and got all mixed up.
Yeah.
And then I put him, the night we moved in, I put him in the garage. Butter on his paws and locked them in.
Yeah.
And the next day he stayed out all day and he stayed around till night time as well. So that's what somebody said, butter on the paws.
Yeah, it makes them feel. Then they love butter, so they get a warm, fuzzy feeling about where they are. Yeah. They associate the yum.
Right, thank you. We'll reconvene our meeting and go back to going through our supporting documents.
So the development contribution schedule. So that's, as you know, we've got our development contributions policy, which outlines sort of how we apply DCs and the rules around that. And then sitting behind that is the schedule of what we're actually going to do. So that's the list of physical works, both roading and Three Waters, as well as some of the parks and community assets that sit in behind that as well. Typically, the DC schedule is a 20-year plan of works. And as you'll know from the pre-Christmas meetings that we've had, there's been a lot of work done on this schedule to find a place where we can fit the investment for Turners Road, and then also align our Maiawa investment program to align with the key developers being Sovereign and Classics up there, as well as any other commitments to the other landowners that we've made as we've developed that area. So the schedule outlines what we've done and what that looks like. That feeds then into the budgets, forms part of the wider draft LTP budgets, and then the works that fall off the back of that. So I think we've traversed that in quite some detail in terms of the shuffling around of projects to try and make everything fit effectively. So.
Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. Yeah, we didn't get a chance to have input in regard to the scheduling of works.
Yeah, that was prior to Christmas.
Well, we didn't see the full schedule where the 20-year program was outlined.
So so for the 10-year plan, a lot of the pre-Christmas work was the precinct 4, precinct 5 works that we had, and then the shifting out to make room for Turners Road, and then how and where we could fit the rest of it. There is a full schedule which shows the 20, which is actually pushed out to about 24 years now to make it all work. I think we've got an upcoming workshop item 2 weeks' time to look at that full program right out through to the end of the program.
Because we've got Banks's line, the development that's taking place there is quite substantial. Now, they're all paying DC contributions and they require a footpath for children to get to Rongotia School, for example.
Yep. So I think that session in a couple of weeks will be a good time to look at that. A lot of the work done pre-Christmas feeding into the long-term plan budget was specifically around the precinct 4 and 5 and how we could fit that work program in to align with our desires and also that of the landowners and developers that we're working with. So that's a good conversation for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that was our concern, that they'd get missed off the scheduling list.
Okay, we'll hang on to that one. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. This development contribution's always been a little bit of a hot topic for some reason or the other. And clearly some councils don't have development contributions and some councils do. I guess, I mean, the reality is that growth is going to cause considerable cost. So the question I've got is, are we being realistic in terms of the level of our development contributions, in terms of arriving at a situation where development contributions are actually not consistently in arrears or in deficit, to the point where actually development contributions are actually paying for what they're actually planned to pay for? Because whilst we look at the amount and we may think it's rather unpalatable, the fact of the matter is that infrastructure costs have risen by whatever they've risen by, 50-70% over the last 2 or 3 years. And actually, probably development contributions haven't actually risen in any way that's appropriate to the level of cost increases that we're facing for infrastructure development.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And it's a very realistic problem. I think when we come back in a couple of weeks' time, we can talk probably in more detail around that. But
we'll have the figures.
Yeah, and we'll have the figures. Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah. Reality is we have works that we do as part of lead infrastructure, and then we have growth areas where we'll sort of have growth corridors and roading corridors and growth planning. And then when you get your developers, and particularly your bigger ones, we actually work with them in terms of what infrastructure work they will do and then invest back with council, as opposed to what we will do and charge a DC for. So there's a whole range of things that go into that bucket, but in a couple of weeks we'll have a pretty good run through of that.
Yep, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Just on the same subject, would be really helpful as part of the big picture to have some comparisons of DCs with other councils around the country. The region, because it's always important, where do we fit in region-wise? But I remember one previous occasion, we might have been the highest in the region, but we were only about average for New Zealand. And that was really useful for decision-making as well. So just a request, maybe when we're in a couple of weeks' time.
I see Lisa's writing notes to my right, so I'm assuming that we can say, yes, we'll bring that back as well. Yep.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Great.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Anything further on that?
Excellent.
Okay, the significance and engagement policy. So critically, this is different in terms of process to the other documents that we've been just discussing, and that most of what we've discussed this morning, we're asking for your approval today to officially send those through to audit. This one, we're actually asking for you to adopt it today. It is not compulsory that we review our significance and engagement policy as part of the long-term plan, but it is good practice. Most councils do it. The auditors certainly give us a big tick if we do so. What this policy covers, it outlines how we decide whether or not, and then how to consult with the community on various council decisions. Critically, it is not just about financial consequences. The criteria for how we decide whether and how to consult also includes things like the number of residents affected and the degree to which they are affected, the level of community interest, and whether or not the topic is likely to be controversial or has a history of being controversial. We last adopted this in 2020. Was due for review in March of last year, but at the time we agreed that the level of legislative uncertainty that existed at the time meant that we should delay it. The reality is that we still have much legislative uncertainty. We are not proposing any changes to the policy at all, except the adoption date.
It's straightforward. Councillor Bell.
Tēnā koutou. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge all the mahi that's been done for today. I have a question, Shane. Number 4, the recommendations that the Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated authority to make minor changes. And one of them is this, the engagement significant policy. What would constitute a minor change? Is that semantics? Are you the grammar police, or is that just, what does that look like for me as a new councillor?
Well, I'm not the grammar police, but it's under my authority. The grammar police will give us. So yeah, it's pretty much around punctuation, and it's so the key content of the document that doesn't cover that. We should point out that a lot of these documents these aren't the final documents. These are documents going to audit, and then following audit comment, then we will probably be amending some of those to align with what audit require. That will come within, the gambit of that, but all of that will come back to council, and we will show you the bits that auditors have required us to amend. And then it goes through the final proofreading. Now, there's a lot of these documents haven't been proofread yet. So, all of that leads into that final draft LTP that's the 7 March. And everything we do, we will come back and show you what we've done.
I feel comfortable that we will have more opportunity to discuss this policy. Out of everything that I've read and seen today, this is probably the one where I feel unsatisfied with. It's very clear that in 2020, this policy suited the council of the day. We are now in 2024 and we have a Māori ward. So I feel it's my duty to my constituent to let you know, the officers, that this significance and engagement policy, my constituent deserve better. Tangata whenua, mana whenua deserve better. When I first read the significance engagement policy, when I first came in, Te Marawate had asked all Māori wards to read theirs. My view was that it was stale. And that was before I had compared it to other councils. Now that I look at other councils, if I was to present this to Te Kōtui Reo, I'd be embarrassed by it. So I would encourage the officers in your team, challenge us at a governance level, make amendments and recommendations that are worthy. When I look at even just our neighbours, their significance engagement policies are a lot stronger than ours. Ours are soft. The benchmark for me would probably be New Plymouth. I wouldn't approve or accept anything less. But aspirationally, Rotorua Council was something that I just enjoyed reading. They even have an assessment model on their significance about the impact of their council engagement. And I think, even looking at their principles around transparency, equity, inclusiveness, tangata whenua participation, there's principles there that guide their engagement that I think is really stunning. And it's an opportunity for us to look at. But I'm really happy, Shane, to hear that we have that opportunity. At the moment, we're approving it for audit purposes. But in terms of what I see as a Māori ward councillor, what you've presented today, would not be good enough. Okay. And I won't be approving it.
This was actually up for approval today, and it wasn't one of those documents that we were going to consult on. But that's up to council. If council decides that you don't want to adopt it as it has been, given the points you've raised, then we will go away and we will do some work and we'll bring it back again. Simple as that.
I mean, I'm just one opinion, but if I was to rate it out of 10, it would be a 3. And I'm usually quite kind to your officers in their recommendation reports. This is the first time I've given critical feedback, unless it's Hamish asking for money. But I would rate this a 3, and I'm being kind.
That's good feedback. But again, today, if the council wants us to go away and look at those issues that you have raised today, I'm sure they're very valid, and then we can do that. We can not adopt today. We can, over the next 2 weeks, come back, show you what we found. Entirely up to you.
So just to help Councillor Bell, just to help us, because we're going to be asked to make a decision on whether or not to support this. The reference 4.4.4. So what I'm wanting to get from you is what in concept is missing.
So the example would be great for governance for you to read is the Rotorua significance engagement policy. What's missing for me is really a stronger commitment to the relationship of tangata whenua participation. You'll see it in the Rotorua one, it's very clear. The other things that, outside of Te Ao Māori, the things that I really appreciated in that policy, Her Worship, is the principles around transparency, building capacity within the community. So those are things that I think that we might want to look at to adopt. So I've given some real examples. If you're struggling with what they are, I'm happy to give a thorough email and even start writing myself. I'm happy to do that. Te Kotuere will have a workshop on the 11th of February where I'll be presenting this policy to them. We already had a presentation by a New Plymouth councillor on our policy last year at Rangiotu Marae in front of the 12 Marae. So we had a New Plymouth council that came and compared his and ours. So they're already aware of this policy. But what I want to do is I want to go to Te Kotuere and let them know that this isn't the benchmark. But if it is, then I have to let you know that I'm already embarrassed by it. So is there any sort of details that you want me to explain, Her Worship, on what I think could be added, or explain what an asset model would be like to determine how you, determining the impact of engagement? Because I'd probably just rather send you the link.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's more about, to me, it's about, have we got the overview of our engagement with Māori? Have we got that covered?
I don't think we have it covered enough. I think we had it covered when it suited the governance, where there wasn't a Māori ward sitting at this table. It was in 2020. It most certainly doesn't suit tangata whenua now that we're sitting at this table. But I also understand that at the time you didn't have opportunity from tangata whenua to give feedback. Now you do. The overview isn't satisfactory, Her Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, my view of engagement is simple. We're obliged to engage with the community in its entirety. It doesn't matter who you are in the community. We shouldn't be specific about individual sections of the community. We're obliged to engage with the community as the community. And I've probably got one question for Councillor Bell, is who she considers her constituents, because at the end of the day, our constituents for all of us are the community at large. So I personally don't have an issue with this. Engagement's engagement, and I don't really think we need to consider it in any other way that we engage with the community as the community equally.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield. To answer your question, yes, I am aware that my constituent is the entire community. Māori, mana whenua and tangata whenua are part of that community, but I also am deeply aware that I'm a Māori ward and I'm the only Māori that's sitting on this table. So it should be no surprise that I would champion for my people. I think one of the things I want to just respond to Councillor Hadfield, because it seems to be the narrative between him and I often. When I champion for Māori, it doesn't mean that I'm anti-Pākehā or anti-ethnic groups. In fact, what I think is what I'm championing for is the betterment for all community. I've also just mentioned, Councillor Hadfield, that I'm also talking about other things like transparency to be added into the citizens engagement policy, building capacity within the community, and that includes non-Māori as well.
Frances, we'll go to you.
We're just discussing some process and timing issues around this policy. If we make significant changes to this one, we are required to use the special consultative procedure to consult with the community on that. If we were going to do that, it would be ideal to do that in line with the long-term plan, but the realities of the timing in terms of this long-term plan make that problematic, particularly if we're undertaking the level of meaningful change that Councillor Bell is describing. It is, of course, possible at any point in the triennium to review a policy and to go through that special consultative procedure. We would just have to be very thoughtful about how we do that in line with the LTP timing.
Thank you. Bear that in mind, and also if there's any other discussion on that, happy to take it, but also depending where we get to with the motion that's on the table today. Councillor Underwood.
with the definitions for significance and significant, I understand that they come from Local Government Act, but I'm wondering if the definition for significant could be reviewed. I just feel like it's a bit circular in that it's using its own name to define itself. And I think it just looks a bit unprofessional.
As you point out, Councillor Underwood, that is the exact wording of the legislation. So
that's what we have to use. Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I'd just like to add my support for what Councillor Bell has very eloquently articulated this morning, much better than I could do. I just probably want to broaden that perspective a little bit, because as I reflect back on the last 16 months, I can't recall a lot that's kind of come for a decision that has triggered this policy. And now that I'm a little bit more experienced, I wonder whether there were some things that perhaps should have. And so, you know, I look at significance. One of the points is any persons who are likely to be particularly affected by or interested in the issue, proposal, decision, or matter. I'm thinking particularly here of young people who experience those decisions we make for a much longer period of time potentially than others. And I think we've got some real opportunities there, and that would feed into the principle articulated around capacity building or capability building. We've talked often about how do we encourage people into this space who would want to participate in local democracy, be representatives on a council, work in council, whatever. So I really see this as an opportunity to do a lot more with our community engagement. It really forms the essence of our formal relationship with the community, and I'd like to add my support and hope we can, through whatever process we might need to, whatever makes sense, so we can achieve all the things we need to in a timely way. I really hope we can relook at this.
Thank you, Councillor Short.
Thank you. I did also have a look at some other councils' significance and engagement policies, and ours looks incredibly dry and boring, to be honest. Some of them have made theirs a lot more palatable and have expanded a lot more than what we have. And I do agree with Councillor Bell that even the fact that the first mention of mana whenua is in chapter 4.2, halfway down the document, it should have a chapter of its own, like many of the other ones do when you look at some of the other councils. And perhaps we can use Te Kiwai o Te Kiti as our basis for how to engage with mana whenua.
Councillor Campbell.
I can recall my father was on this council when the policy was first introduced, and it came in by way of legislative requirement across the country. There was a huge outcry across the country for why do we need this sort of thing? It's just bureaucratic extras that we've got to deal with, but it's proved to be particularly useful, I think, for councils and for us to encourage us to engage appropriately. But anyway, it does, I think, just bring into question our program of review of our policies. You know, that we do have a program to do that and do it regularly. And I'll also note, Councillor Bell, you'll be aware that we've got a separate policy, Te Kiwai o Te Kiti, which specifically, you know, it deals with our approach to working with whānau hapu and iwi in the district. So that one too is probably due for a review. It's overdue according to the review date that's on it. So yeah, it obviously is a program of work to be done over a period of time to review every policy we've got in an appropriate time frame and appropriate manner.
Okay, I think a key point that Francis has pointed out is that to meet the deadline for LTP and audit, if there was some wish to change this, to keep the time frame for what we're trying to do, we'd need to keep going, but signal that it comes back to the table for a refresh at the next appropriate time. Councillor Bell.
Her Worship, if that is the tone of where we accept it today, we adopt it, and then we give an opportunity for us to midi with it later, could we at least set a date? Because it's quite general when we say at the appropriate time it can come back. The appropriate time might be when we're not all sitting at the next table in the next triennium. So I'm just careful that if we are alluding to the fact that we will return to this, that we be given a date, please.
Or that will be up to management to.
So I'm looking at you, Shane, yeah. When I say date, capital letters, bold, italics, headline, underline.
I think just briefly talking, and it is, I think if we go, I think for the purposes of adopting this today, so that it can go in for the purposes of audit and part of the LTP, I'd like to think we could bring something back to council by the time we adopted the LTP.
And then that version will be adopted into the LTP?
Eventually, depending on where council wants to go. But at least it gives that opportunity. And I don't know how much work's going to be involved, but if it's a matter of looking at other councils and what they've done, you know, potentially it's not going to be a great deal to bring back content for a workshop or a discussion. So just kind of thinking out loud here without too much consultation with the team.
And the issue that we would have is that if we significantly change the significance engagement policy, which I think is what is being discussed here today, we would need to go through a full consultation with the community.
Awesome.
Which would make it problematic to do that within the LTP timeframe.
Francis, if I can just mention something, and it's not a criticism, the fact that we're under time pressures, and that's the constraint as to the reason why we're going to rush this, and with RT time pressures, I want to ask you something. Why wasn't this given us to Wānanga a lot earlier?
Well, when we made the decision in, was it January or February, early last year, we made the decision to hold the review of the significance and engagement policy because of that legislative uncertainty. We have had some clarity on some things from the new government, but there's still a lot that is yet to kind of come out in the wash. And I suppose that the issues that have been put on the table today are different from what we had been thinking or discussing in terms of updates for the significance and engagement policy. I also think that if we are going to meaningfully review the policy, it's absolutely not something that we would want to rush. We would want to make sure that we get it right and that we put the time involved, necessary to actually do a really good job of it. I'm also conscious of the relationships that we've got with various stakeholders who would be critical to helping us, create a new version of this policy, and taking the time to make sure that we are in a good space with those stakeholders.
I just want to make another comment. Everything that you've listed to me, I don't see as a barrier in my perspective. I see it as opportunity, and I'm really excited. And I hope that we do have the opportunity to have meaningful consultation. This policy is extremely important, Francis. So for me, rushing it and also putting on pressure because of auditing LTP processes doesn't sit right with me at the moment. That's just a comment. That's not a question, but thank you for answering my question. Again, team, I recognise the pressure and I respect the pressure that you're under when it comes to auditing timeframes, but it's really important that my people that will probably listen to this after this, Councillor Hafu, when I mean by my people, I mean Te Kotu Reo, I'll be specific, and Māori and Tangaswhia Mana Whenua know that this is not the standard that I want for us.
Just by way of a suggestion and having a chat with Lisa and looking at legislation and the like, can I suggest that council consider not adopting that today, which means that the current policy would just stand. And we only have to review it from time to time. We aren't fixed to a date, so that we don't adopt today. The current policy stands, but we undertake that we will review that policy, and we'll get something back to you by way of either a plan or how the project might shape up within the next couple of 3 months, and then we can discuss where to from there. And on the hoof, that's probably about as much as I can commit to.
Councillor Ford.
I just wondered, to try and make progress, is it something that we could commit to reviewing in 2024?
Council could commit to it, but what I'm suggesting is that we bring a plan back to you to show you, so we get a good scope around what we're trying to achieve, an idea of what engagement is likely to be required when we review this, and in our timeline. And it could well be that it takes 24 to do that, but that'll be your call.
Okay. And was that our last one?
That is the last one. We'll move on to some summary slides just on the consultation document itself, because all these supporting information ultimately are described in this one document. So the whole point of the consultation document is that a standard person can kind of pick it up and understand the complex story of the LTP in reasonably simple terms, and so that's what we've tried to do. I've got to say it's a good example of it takes quite a long time to write a simple story. Yeah, that's been our core focus over the last month. Just going through with this, so all the new initiatives that we've got in here were presented at the 30th of November workshop last year. The consultation issues, so there are 4 consultations in the document. They were confirmed on the 7th of December, and we are heading towards going out of our consultation document from the 11th of March, with council approving the final version on the 7th of March. Just so you can be really clear on what we are consulting on with the document. So we've got the 4 issues and options that we've agreed on the 7th of December. Those issues are the rating differential for roading, removing that over a 3-year period, closing or rebuilding the bird aviaries in Kowhai Park, how we fairly share the costs of enforcing time limited parking within the Feilding CBD, and also various changes to our funding mixes, partly to reflect kind of the way that our business works at the moment, especially with user fees, where we can't kind of set the user fee, it's legislated, so that means that the balance has to be adjusted. But also there's a general shift more towards user charges away from rates funding, where the user who uses the service pays for the service. So that's the summary of those. We also have to consult on our draft revenue financing policy, the rates remission and postponement policy, and the development and financial contributions policy. The first 2 you saw today, and as Shane said before, we'll be bringing the development and financial here in a couple of weeks' time for discussion. So that's the consultation document. I've got to say, the version you've got is a working document. You'll see some of the formatting's a bit all over the place. We didn't want to invest too much time in the Word document, because really the magic happens when Ree grabs it and Victoria and Ree design up the version. You'll see a preview of that design later on today. It really is the art of a consultation document. Half of it's in the words you use, half of it's actually in the way it presents on the page. So apologise, this formatting looks a little bit dodged, but we didn't want to invest too much time in a Word document that really has a real limited life.
Thank you. I guess we've all been through it and have a few things we want to comment on. I'll start. One of them is you could argue it's part of your formatting thing, but on page 79, that graph, the two blues don't really stand out. Can we change one of those blues to another colour?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all those graphs, except for the benchmark graphs that Amanda showed before, which are legislatively, you have to use certain colouring formats for those. The rest are being redesigned by the comms team.
Okay, so just going back to the page 68, or page 7 of the report, our achievements over the past 3 years, I think we've been too modest. We had an exceptional year on what council achieved, particularly last year. And I think we need to, there are some things in here we can bundle together, like the work that we've been doing in the wellbeing space around Pahongana community, Himatangi Beach, Mount Lees, that kind of family stuff. But things like wastewater centralisation, council's response to weather events. We've had the storm, we had those flash thunderstorms, we've had the cyclone, and a number of, there's no mention there around that. The COVID response that council did in relation to encouraging communities to re-engage, and we did a lot of work about that. We should be proud of that. And the other thing, I don't like the word kids in the Kowhai Park blurb. Maybe we could say young people or youth or whatever. But the other one is this council had a significant role nationally in looking to stop the Three Waters reform. And, we need to take some credit for that. And so some of that work that we've been doing at the national level, and the ratepayers they've got no idea the hours that Lisa and her team spend on all these submissions and things we've made to government's reform. And, we've spent a lot of effort on behalf of our community, and we need to make sure our community understands that we are working at that level as well. I think that they were my only comments. Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Just a couple of extra comments. One is a question, page 81 or 20, Hamish. Stormwater, just the rating for stormwater goes from $3.83 down to $2.92. And I'm thinking, gosh, that's puzzling. Why would that be?
Sounds like an Amanda question, Councillor Ford.
You can come back to me if you like, but I'll just, I'm sorry, I've only looked at the stuff this morning, to be fair. The next one was page, where are we, 24. Te Utanganui, I would suggest that 1% of the population would know what that means. So could we have in brackets an English interpretation? Yep. Page 26. There's been a lot of talk about Maiwa being able to house 1,700 or 1,750 houses. And we talked there about 600. I understand that the 1,700 was reduced and then maybe a retirement village as well, but there's a big difference, and I don't know whether that's been explained, but the 1,700's been out there in the public realm for quite a while. Perhaps I'll just quickly rattle through. I've only got two more. 29. Page 90 or 29. We've already built and strengthened water reservoirs in Fraser Road. Well, A, it's Fraser Drive, and B, it's McDonald Heights, isn't it?
That's correct. Yep, Fraser Drive.
So it should be McDonald Heights. And apart from praising Andrew for his rapid deployment air shelter idea, the actual thing I wanted to say was really minor. Page 96, 35, Kowhai Park. Since 1964, when the Feilding JCs donated the aviaries at Kowhai Park, Feilding residents, I suggest we put district residents.
Yeah.
Because I saw someone from Colleton looking at those ovaries once. Was he lost?
He just wanted everyone else to pay for it.
Just going back, following up from Michael, he did mention the Rapid Deployment Emergency Response Centre. Is that financial figure correct?
What page, sorry, Your Worship?
30 or 91? Like you're saying it's just under $53,000. Okay, that's cool. Really good. And the other one on page 24 or 85, we talk about, second paragraph, we talk about Three Waters delivery. It says, while this approach is inconsistent with current water services legislation, well, the fact it's now been repealed, does it still make it current?
Today.
Yeah, still current legislation until it is.
Until it's not, yeah.
And we can change that later. If it is repealed by the time we go to draft, we'll change it.
Yeah.
Lisa and her team actually checked that wording with Audit to make sure that they were happy with that, and they agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Councillor Hadfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I have to support Councillor Ford's comments on the full credit to Councillor Quarry on the tent. I think it's fantastic, fantastic move. Just on page 83, and I just might need reminding about this, but provision, we've made provision in years 6 and 7 of the LTP to renew the existing discharge consents for Kimbolton and Cheltenham.
Correct.
And I'm uncertain where we've got to in terms of the status of those two wastewater treatment plants in terms of the overall or original wastewater centralisation plan. Now, my personal view is that we shouldn't lose sight of actually achieving that at some point in time, and probably I would actually like to see that reflected within that statement, which probably doesn't.
I think through Your Worship, the place for that is through the infrastructure strategy / asset management. So within the 10-year period of the long-term plan, we're not planning to do that. So we have to renew those consents. We haven't lost sight of that as an end goal, but it's outside of that first 10-year window.
Beautiful, thank you. And the other, I've been accused of this all the time, but throughout this document, we refer to climate change, and I think it's far more appropriate in places to be in context to refer to climate events. Now, I don't know how many times I've said that, but anyhow, clearly nobody listens, but I'll say it again regardless.
Councillor Underwood.
Funnily enough, I've got something to say about climate change too. Page 74, I just want to object to some of the statements there. The first paragraph under the warmer climate says, Manawatū, the increase in average temperatures. The next paragraph talks about the forecast increase in average temperature. So I think we need to make it clear that it's a forecast and there's no actual evidence for increase in average temperature as yet. 2 paragraphs down, we know that in the future we will see more flooding events. Well, if you're going to say that, I think you need to show proof of that. There's just been a new report out on NIWA's. They've done a spot audit on NIWA's 2023 annual climate summary, and also some spot audits on their previous 5 years reports to show that there are major errors that cumulatively have exaggerated the impact of climate warming. So I think we need to be careful what we say without any evidence at this stage, because it's coming out that NIWA have not been doing a good job, and a lot of the evidence about increasing intensity and frequency of events only goes back as far as 1976. So, if we're going to only go back that far, we can't really make a comparison about whether things are increasing or not. So I would like to see us be very careful about saying things like we know that and there is an increase. Can I go on?
Yeah, sure.
I've got a couple of pages, sorry. On page 77, I'm just under the rates heading, that first paragraph, just the sense of that statement. The chart on page X summarises how much an example Feilding and rural ratepayer would spend. I think another word other than example, maybe typical or something like that. It's just a little bit, I found it difficult to understand. I had to read it several times. Yeah, we'll want to go away from average. I don't know. Page 79, I'm just wondering if there's a percentage missing at the top there under environmental health. We talk about 90% rates. And then I think it's supposed to say 10% user charges after that. There's a percentage missing there. On page 80, in the very last bracket, it's about the fact that if we maintain our roads to a higher standard, in the bracket it says we fund the whole cost of any new roads above that cost. I just think that's a little bit hard to understand. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me. Then on the very next page, how will my rates be used? I worked out when I got to the bottom that it's actually weekly rates we're talking about, and I'm wondering if we could put that in the heading so people can see it straight away. We're talking about weekly rates. And then the right-hand column, model rates, I'm not too sure what that refers to. Is it what rates are going to be with the changes? On page 82, there's a big number there about our Three Waters assets. I would put it to that quite a few people will not understand what that number is. I was just wondering if we could simplify it down to 511 million rather than have the whole 9 digits. And then on page 84, we're referring to infill. Down the second to last paragraph, a combination of infill and greenfield development. Will the general public understand what infill and greenfield development are, or do we need to kind of maybe make that a little bit easier if we're wanting it to be for them to understand? And then it says development in rural villages, such as Rongatia, but there hasn't been another village mentioned. And I think people would be interested to know if there are other villages that qualify, that have vacant land available for development. On page 89, it was just a question I think Hamish might be able to answer. We've got that chart of expenditure, and it says in the bottom of page 88 that the wastewater pipelines and pump stations are due for completion in 24-25. And then the following budget expenditure has the next 5 years with lots of budget available. Is that it's not, I can't see that it's explained what those further costs are for. If the pipeline and the pump stations are complete, then we've got lots of money there for something else.
I'll check the terminology of that. Yeah, there's a difference between the pumps and pipes, but the works between the two, those figures consolidate up to pumps and pipes and land tenure and consents and anything else.
So that it won't be completed in 24-25, like it's going on for the next 5 years after that, according to that chart.
So the construction of the wastewater pipelines and pump stations in Rongotia is due for completion then.
Okay, so it's not all the other ones. Yep.
Correct. Yep.
And on page 92, there's another budget chart that's got a line missing. Year 2030, 2031 is missing. At the very top of page 92, that's the Aurora River Walkway. So I don't know if that means that nothing's happening in that or that year, or that the year is missing. With those 4 things that we're consulting on, I'd like to suggest that we don't give council's preferred option, because I know when we've been doing those consultation things with the public, people have said, "Oh, council's always really made up their mind. It's not worth us, making a comment on it."
We have to.
You have to.
The legislation requires us to show council's preferred option.
Okay. I just thought it might, discourage people from trying to say anything. And on page 103, I was wondering if there was a third option. I know we've discussed this in council, but I don't know if when we're talking about the CBD targeted rate for the redevelopment, it was 85.15, and option B 0-100% in the general rate. I was wondering if there could be a third option where the CBD still pay more than everyone, but not the 85%. I think they probably benefit the most from the refurbishment of the central business district, and whether they should have a bit of a loading. One more query on page 105.
So you're saying a loading that's less than 85%?
Yes, and it could be much less than 85%, but at least it shows that they are probably benefiting more than the general public as a whole.
If I may just make a quick comment, the 85% I think has been particularly harsh on the CBD for 30 years. So I think they've more than paid their share, and so I wouldn't support what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's just a suggestion.
Fair enough. And I'm making a comment.
And 105, at the very top there, option B in the middle column says $53 minus $50. I was just wondering where that came from. I couldn't follow where that amount came from. Is it saying that the $88 has gone down to 53? And if so, that's a $33 decrease, not a $50 decrease? Not too sure.
I would read that as saying it's now $53 and it's down $50.
Yeah, but from what? From what amount? The 88?
Yeah. Good spotting.
Thank you. I'm finished.
Yep, great spotting. Anybody else picked up things? Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, just for example, on page 96-35, when we're going out with a consultation document, I think we need to be very clear on, as a reader. So, for example, I'm reading it and I pay rates in Feilding and also in the rural area, in the CBD in the rural area. I'd like to know exactly what effect it's going to have on me in terms of my rates. And I don't know that this is all that clear. I'm trying to work out what effect our proposal may have on my rates. So, for example, what we're saying here is that we've got an example property of 660,000. A Feilding residential ratepayer is going to save about $80 over 3 years, and a rural property will go up $50, and the Feilding CBD will come down quite a bit. Is that, a fair reflection of? But the thing is that the average value of a property in the rural sector from a farm, for example, is excessively more than that. It's probably 6 million, say. Does that mean that their rates are likely to go up, say, what's that, $50 times 10, 500? I'm just trying to struggle. I think if there's a way of making this easier to end, it would maybe be useful.
Okay, so we as an exec team went round and round a little bit with these as well.
Yeah.
I was like, we should shop this way. So what we've done with anything that's capital value based discussions, any of the rates that have a capital value, so a general rate proportion, we've used the median district price, not the medium for each of the properties. And the reason being that when you're trying to explain to a ratepayer that Feilding residential and Feilding rural, for instance, when we're doing the differentials, that the rural is going to pay more, it doesn't reflect that when the rural's capital value is so much higher than the residential. So by having them at the same price, you can clearly see what the impact of the differential was doing. And because you're comparing apples for apples. There are properties in the rural that are the same at 660,000, which is a median, and there are residential properties at 660. So it's not completely unrealistic, but it's about showing, what we were trying to show is how the residential, the rural, each of those classifications, we're actually paying higher or lower depending on their capital value. So if they were the same capital value, it was easier to see. And I'm hoping that's what we've kind of done by doing it that way. Yeah. Otherwise, the story we were saying wasn't being matched by what we were showing, because we're showing a $1.2 million rural property and a $600,000 residential property.
Yeah.
Hoping that.
The other thing, which is not there, is showing. So the first column is year one, so that's a year out. That doesn't compare to what people are paying now, does it? So
there is a status quo option.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not actually,
yeah, that'll show there, I suppose.
Says the person who's not actually looking at what you're looking at, but in everything there's a status quo option.
Yeah.
And then there's the preferred. So I'm thinking that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So status quo would be Feilding residential 647. Year one, it goes down to 594. Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Blackmore.
Possibly a question for David. A few months ago, we did a bit of a workshop about the strengths and identity of the district, and I'm just wondering where maybe some of the themes are starting to show up in our documentation, or how it's been used, if at all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so from that meeting, I didn't think there was a consensus that we should change the strategic priorities, but we have tried to blend some of the terms that came through within the language, the way that I've written some of the statements. So you'll see there's a backbone coming out quite a few, but that's pretty much the extent of it.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Oh, one other thing I meant to ask was, are we able to get a spreadsheet of the token drop responses? Has that been put together?
Yes, I'm getting a nod by Ree, so you will be able to get it.
When? Sorry?
Ree?
We already seen that. Thanks.
Okay. Good conversation, lots of good spotting. Okay, is there anything else on that one, David?
No, so as I said before, Ree and her team will show you a little sneak preview of how the design's coming up, and you'll see it's pretty hard to get a feel for it when you just see plain text words, but the design will give you a feel for what it actually looks like when it goes out to the public. I just wanted to flick over just to the time frame first before we go back to the report recommendations. So just to give you a feel for what's happening over the next month or so. We will be designing up the CD after this meeting and presenting that to Audit New Zealand on the 9th of February. They will have a plain text version over the next few days just to get the gist of it. And I'm trying to put them off in terms of their formal review until we have that designed CD ready to go. We are developing a consultation plan at the moment so that we have a really good plan about the events we're hitting, the kind of promotion that we are doing for this CD. And we will present that to you on the 15th of February. It will also be discussed at the RTP focus group on, I think it's the 8th of February as well. So there'll be a detailed plan. We are aiming for an audited CD to be adopted by Council on the 7th of March, and then consultation opens between 11th of March to the 15th of April, and that's when we hear from our communities. From that period on, we'll have processes to look at the submissions and theme them up and provide advice around that following on. But this is very much a close of the RTP framing phase of the RTP, now moving into the consultation phase.
So, David, you have already identified hearings and deliberation dates, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
And are they in everybody's diaries? Because I think it's really important, particularly new councillors who haven't been through this process before, it's really important that you attend those sessions.
Yep.
They are extra days, but for this process, it's absolutely vital that we're all here.
Yeah.
Those dates went in last year, so.
Yeah.
1st, 2nd and 3rd of May.
Okay, well, that's really the closeout. I've got the summary of the report recommendations up there. Of course, the significance of engagement policy will have to be taken off. But those are the things that we're seeking today.
46.
So, Your Worship, if you just go into your recommendations on the report, my suggestion is we just delete recommendation 1. Well, not delete it, but we don't include it in the resolution, which is the adoption of the consultation. Oh, sorry, not recommendation.
No, not that one.
Number 3.
Yeah, number 3.
So everything stays the same, except
3
comes out of a council resolution.
Yes, okay. Right, so having said that, we're on page 46 and we're looking to remove recommendation 3. I'm happy to move that Council approves the draft consultation document attachment 1 for submission to Audit New Zealand, noting that the final design will be completed before submission. 2, that Council approves the following supporting documents attachment 2 for submission to Audit New Zealand as listed, and with the note. And item 4, that the Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated authority to make minor changes to the consultation documents, supporting documents. We probably should leave that significant and engagement piece out. 2024 arising from this meeting prior to submission to audit.
Excuse me, Your Worship, I think we should vote on submission 3 or point 3 because it hasn't been decided whether the council wishes to remove it or not.
That's a good point. We haven't had an agreement round the table, do we, or don't we? So let's do that one individually. So, okay, we'll do them one at a time. So, and so I'll put on the table that Council adopts the Significance and Engagement Policy 2024 Attachment 3 and approves this policy for submission to Audit New Zealand. So having read those out, do I have a seconder?
Sorry, can I just check for moving those 3? Just
no, we're going to go through them all as written. This is the number 1. But we'll take each one at a time. Yes, number 3, yep. Because Councillor Quarry made the point that we haven't actually made the decision as a vote of whether we want to keep what we've got.
Your Worship, can I suggest you take each recommendation on its own?
That's
Number
what
1,
I was
get a
intending.
mover and a seconder for that, then vote on that, then move to 2, then move to 3.
My intention was to do them one at a time. So I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder for recommendation 1? Councillor Ford, thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Motion 2. I'm happy to move that. Seconded, Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
So is it? I'm confused. Sorry.
We're just doing one at a time. Each recommend.
So each hasn't
Sorry,
that the
you're
council
doing
approves the following supporting documents for submission to
right.
Audit New
You're
Zealand.
not doing each supporting document individually. Sorry.
No, we're not doing each document
Right.
separately. So, so we're doing the complete of 2. So we had a mover and a seconder. We got that, didn't we? Yep, excellent. Okay. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do we have a mover and a seconder for item 3? Councillor Quarry?
Yeah, I would like to move that the council adopts the significance and engagement policy 2024 attachment 3 and approves this policy for submission to Audit New Zealand.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hadfield, thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure. Councillor Underwood.
So if that is removed and you're going to send it as is because Audit New Zealand need it, that's correct?
Yeah, if this is lost, the current policy stays in place.
Yep. And that review date, which is on the front, 1st of February, would be removed and it won't be shown as being reviewed.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so just to make that clear, if this motion is carried, this one goes to Audit New Zealand, and if the motion is lost, the existing policy remains.
An existing and the one that presented today is the same thing.
Yeah. But one's got reviewed or not.
Oh, you're saying the content is exactly the same. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
No.
Okay, the motion is lost. And item 4, that the Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated authority to make any minor changes to the consultation documents, supporting documents 2024 arising from this meeting prior to submission to audit. Have a seconder, please. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That whole discussion is an amazing amount of work and discussion and commitment by everybody. So well done. Congratulations to everybody. We've got this far. And yeah, so that's very good. And when you're talking to other councils, they're struggling to even get this far. So we've done incredibly well.
If I may just add my congratulations and thanks to everybody, particularly our staff. I know how much work goes into it. Well, no, I don't know. I've got a fairly good idea how much work goes into it. And you know, it's a privilege to be part of a team, the team MDC. When we're doing good work like this, we don't agree on everything, but gee, it's you know, I think we've done pretty well so far.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we have no late items. So item 13 is the public excluded business. I'm happy to move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely confirmation of public excluded council minutes, public excluded minutes from Audit and Risk Committee, and the MCT trustee term expiration. Seconded by Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carried. Thank you.